special meeting to order of the City of Sonoma. This is a special meeting, a budget study session, although I'm sure most people are here to comment or listen to what is on the agenda regarding the budget. If there is anyone who has a public comment on something that is not on this agenda, I'll open it up at this point. But my guess is everyone's here for this, but just as a courtesy, if anyone has something else to share, please do so now. Yes, sir.
Robert Dedler, Sonoma, First Street West. I just want to congratulate and welcome our new city manager to this budget process, and his cohort, whom I've not met, who's been very helpful, I understand, and thank you for your contribution. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. So you speak for all of us when you say that, sir, because we all. Any other any comments from the public? Okay. Are we on Zoom at all on this one?
It's recording.
It's recording. Okay, so just for the record, we're not on Zoom. It is being recorded, and if you can't sleep tonight, okay, so at this point, I'm going to turn this over to our city manager and go forward from there.
Thank you, Mayor, and welcome council and everyone who's attending. Today we're here to present the 2023-24 budget. This is a study session. We're going to try to do a lot today. One, an overview of where we are. I'll go through the agenda in a second. But there's no action today that council is giving us or taking today. We would like your feedback, questions, thoughts, and we'll incorporate that as we move forward. So today what we'll do is go through the schedule. We'll go over the state and federal outlook, go through personnel changes that we're recommending in this budget, and then go through each department one by one. Before I begin too, I also want to introduce Chuck McBride, who is our interim finance director who stepped in a week and a half ago. So appreciate Chuck doing that. It's been a big help. And so he'll be talking through a lot of the slides today. And we're noticing the slides keep going to sleep on us, so we're going to try to keep this, I'll keep fixing it if it does that. The schedule for the budget is, here we go. Basically, we have a study session today, and then our plan is to bring this back on June 21st for adoption. So we do have a little time based on feedback that we received today to incorporate any changes, updates, or anything that follow up any questions. I do anticipate having to follow up on any items that were. I'm just going to check with Wayne real quick if you have any thoughts on this going to sleep on us. After the budget's adopted, then typically what happens is we'll prepare the budget book that you'll all have if you're familiar with, and you'll have that moving forward based on the adopted budget. So with that, I'm going to, actually before we go there, start off with the fact that this budget was based off of and is reflective of the council's goals that were established earlier this year. So I put those up here. We are keeping these at the top of mind as we've developed this budget. We've tried to incorporate anything that helps fund and support these goals in the budget, and we could talk to that as we go through this. Each department is prepared to kind of point that out where it's appropriate. So I'll hand this over to Chuck to start us off with the national outlook on the budget.
Thanks, David. Mayor, members of council. So we'll start out, we'll talk a little bit about kind of the environmental scan at the national and state level, and then we'll kind of work our way down to what we're looking at locally here. Looks like we're having some trouble with the screen, so I see you all got the hard copies in front of you, so you can just follow along. So we'll start out with the national outlook. So there, if you're listening to any of the economists out there, you're probably not hearing anything good about the immediate future of the economy. We are expecting that we're probably going into go into an economic downturn. I don't know whether or not that'll be technically a recession or not, but it does look like we're heading into a period where we're going to see some downturn in the economy. So one of the places that I like to look when I'm kind of looking at the national economic picture in the state of California is UCLA Anderson. We've got a group of economists down there that do a pretty good job. So I was reading their most recent report, and what they're kind of expecting, they're in typical economist fashion, they're not committing to any one projection. They're saying we have two scenarios. One scenario is the non-recession scenario, and that means that GDP drops down to about 0.4% in the first quarter of 2024. The other scenario that they have is a recessionary scenario where GDP drops down to negative 1.7% in the first quarter of 24. So that's negative growth. So just kind of, whenever you talk about GDP growth numbers, generally what I like to tell people is 3% is about just normal organic growth. So to keep up with increases in population, productivity, all that kind of stuff. So 3% is roughly a normal GDP level. So they see us either going to someplace well below normal, 0.4%, or negative and into a recession at negative 1.7% GDP. A couple of things that they're looking at. Obviously, the Fed is trying to slow down the economy, and the economy is very resilient. So you actually saw consumer spending actually increasing in December and January. So the increases that they've made in the discount rate aren't really having an effect. So we've increased rates over the past year. Now we're at a range of 5 to 5.25. And remember that it wasn't that long ago that we were at zero interest rates. So they've really accelerated those, and they're trying to catch up. They're trying to slow down the economy, and they're trying to slow down inflation. So the Fed targets 2% inflation. Right now, in April, we're at 4.9%, so we're well ahead of that. Obviously, you've heard any news in the last year, you know that inflation's a big deal. So, so they're trying to bring that down. So it depends on what happens in the future and how the Fed reacts as to which one of those scenarios evolves. So if inflation continues, Fed is probably going to raise those rates again. And UCLA Anderson thinks those rates could go as high as 6% if they've gotten to really put the brakes onto the economy. And then those inflationary pressures and those increases in that discount rate is driving up other things. So you've seen that mortgage rates have gone up substantially. So if you look at mortgage rates right now, if you look at Freddie Mac, are about 6.6%. If you look back a year ago, they're about 5.1, and if you went back 2 years, they'd be back down around a little bit under 3% actually. So those mortgage rates are going up, and that's going to probably have some effect on housing. Now, nationally, actually, Case-Shiller just came out with their report on housing, and housing nationwide, actually, prices are up just marginally. They're up 0.4% in their last report, and I think that might have come out today. But then if you dissect their report, it's kind of interesting. Housing prices in the southeast of the United States have gone up, but as you work your way west, things get worse. So in their 20-city index, 3 of those cities are in California: San Francisco, LA, San Diego. All of those are negative. So whereas you have home price appreciation in other parts of the country, as you move to the west, you're seeing actually depreciation in home prices. So San Francisco was actually the worst in there. They're over 11% decline based on the Case-Shiller report. And then some of the things that they look at is employment. So employment right now nationwide is strong. We've got 3.4% unemployment rate. I think that was based on the April numbers from BLS. That's a very good unemployment rate. Obviously, if we hit a recessionary scenario or we go into a economic downturn, that's probably going to have a negative effect on unemployment. So UCLA predicts if we go into a recession, that'll probably go up to about 5%. The thing is right now that you're seeing again is that, we talked about that resilience that we're seeing in the economy. We're seeing a lot of resilience in employment because right now for every unemployed person in this on a nationwide basis, there's two jobs. Yeah, so what you're seeing a lot in industries like hospitality and leisure, where they have kind of seasonal employees that they bring in and then they let them go at certain times of year, they're a little hesitant to do that right now. So that's actually keeping employment pretty high. There's some other issues you're seeing, or some other issues that we expect. So right now, I think we're about 1.5 million housing starts nationwide. In the recessionary scenario, if that happens, that drops down to about 1.1. The good news is that based on what I'm seeing, what the predictions are, and I don't know how much stock you put in economic predictions, but what they are saying is that it will probably be one of those typical recessions where it's a deep V. We go in the first quarter of 24, and then we come out pretty quick. We come out within a year. So by 25, we're back out of recession. It's not like that experience that we had in 2007-8, where we just kind of rode along the bottom forever. So that's good news. Some of the other things, we've had some talk about the debt ceiling that could have had some negative effects nationally, and it looks like they've, at least for the time being, sorted that out. So, skipping the slides on here. So let's go and take a look at the state next. So where I started with the state is, oh, and I'm sorry. So what I want to tell you too is just bottom line. If you take nothing else away from that slide on the national discussion on economics, we're headed for some kind of an economic downturn. So just kind of keep that in the back of your mind as we start talking about revenue sources and that kind of thing. So as we turn to the state, first place I always look is at the state budget, and the state of California is doing what the state of California does. They have highly volatile revenue resources. So if you remember last year, the governor was talking about having a $100 billion surplus. When they did the January budget proposal, they had a deficit, and that deficit grew to about $31.5 billion by the time they did the May revision, which came out obviously this month. General fund budget's $224 million, and in that they've got about a $15 billion gap. So California is being plagued by, they talk about in their budget, I said we have volatile revenue sources, and that's what we're seeing. So the way it works with California on the general fund side, 60% of their revenues come from personal income tax. And then of that 60%, about half of that revenue comes from the top 1% earners in California. And you can imagine where the top 1% earners in California get a lot of their revenue. Amazingly, it seems to track very close to the performance of the S&P index. So California, so if we talked about heading into a recessionary downturn, you see some downturn in the stock markets, that's going to put pressure on the top 1% of earners, and that's going to in turn roll into California's budget. So in their budget message, they are, I don't know if they say pessimistic, but they are warning that even this deficit that they're showing could become worse. Economic issues in California, there's been a number of them. We've had some issues, obviously in the logistics sector, where a lot of jobs is kind of a risk mitigation taken by the shippers were moved to the East Coast in California because there's been some labor disputes up and down the coast with the ports. That's had a drag on California's economy. There was also an article, I think it was the Washington Times, that was talking about about capital, venture capital that's starting to dry up in California. It's down substantially, so that's going to have an impact on California. Obviously, we've had some bank failures. So you had 3 major bank failures in the first 4 months of the calendar year here, and we have 2 of them right here in California. So that has not added a lot of optimism on California's economic outlook. Employment in California, though, does we do look good. Unemployment's a little bit higher than the national average, it's 4.5%, according to BLS. So it's what did I say that nation was? I think 3.5%. So we're exceeding them by about 1%. It's interesting though. A lot of jobs have actually come back after the pandemic in fields like tech. They've seen some growth, even though you're seeing some layoffs now there. One place where they're missing a lot of jobs since the pandemic is in the hospitality and leisure industry. So there's about 145,000 jobs that are missing there, a lot of those between LA and San Francisco. One of the bright outlooks for California in that sector at least is that as we've exited the pandemic, you've got more restaurant activity, hospitality industry, so that should hopefully help them. Also, they talked about the end of the zero COVID pandemic response in China, and apparently we have a lot of tourism here from China, so they think that that's a bright spot for California, that we should see some increase in tourism coming back. And then what you've probably seen is this delayed tax receipt thing. So California, almost all the counties, I think except for 5 now, you don't have to remit your taxes until October. Which to my knowledge, that's the first time that it's ever been done. Sometimes they've allowed you to file your taxes late, but you have to pay the remittance up front. So this time you can wait till October. So of course, a lot of people, like in excess of 90%, are taking advantage of that. So that means that California delays those receipts until October. So that's not a bright spot for California. So now we'll turn to citywide expenditures. So I rolled all these up into the major categories of funds that we have. You actually, in your attachments, you've got a detailed schedule that gives you all the, I think, 54 funds that we have in the city, if you want to take a look at those. However, really where we're going to focus today is on the general fund, but I'll talk to some of these funds briefly here. So the general fund, like I said, we'll talk about. You've got a total citywide expenditures there. They're at about $60 million. Total citywide revenue is about $64.7 million. So in the first category there, under the general fund, we've got the enterprise funds. So the enterprise funds are basically, think water and cemetery. So water fund, this year we basically, we kept the revenues for projections. We kept them flat from last year, and the reason is, my understanding is that you're exiting the last year of your rate studies, a 5-year rate study. So I know that staff is coming back to you in August to talk about water rates. So just for purposes of projections, I didn't put any assumed rate increases in here just because I don't know what those are. And if I don't know what those are, just for conservatancy, we'll just assume no growth. Your cemetery's got a deficit of about $300,000. That's not unusual. It seems to be the stand for the cemetery for the past several years. And then you've got internal service funds there, and those are things like management information systems, vehicle replacement, those type of things. Very, very marginal increase there. That basically is essentially flat. And then you've got special revenue funds. Special revenue funds, they're listed in your appendix there, but there's things like PEG, gas tax. You've got the housing trust fund in there, SB1 road maintenance, and you see that you have a bit of an increase there of about $265,000. And most of that's coming from the gas tax. They increased that last fiscal year. I think they took it up by 3 cents a gallon. So you're seeing that effect there in the gas tax line. And then in SB1 also had a bit of an increase in it. So overall there on those special revenue funds, you're seeing some increases. Your agency fund is just the successor agency. That's just a wind down of your RDA that's ongoing. So that hasn't changed at all, nor should it. Debt service funds, there's just one in the debt service fund, and that's a clean energy payment that we have, and I believe that ends on June 30th, I think, but I haven't checked that, but that's going away relatively soon. And then capital project funds, those are $3.9 million, almost $4 million, and we're going to, at the very end of this, after the departments, we'll actually talk to the capital improvement program, so you'll get to see what's detailed in there. So that is an overview of the citywide expenditures. So now for the bad news. So we do have a deficit, about $1.1 million. Okay, so you've got revenues of $24.2 million covering expenditures of $25.3 million. So, just doing rough back of the envelope math there, you've got about a 4% deficit, okay, based on your expenditures, $1.1 million. What's going on here, and I'll show you this in a moment, but you basically, over the last year, you've got a decrease of about 5% in your revenues, and then your expenditures have gone up by about 4%, which is not bad. It's actually pretty reasonable. So that's what's giving you that $1.1 million deficit. So first place we'll look at is revenues. So as I said, your revenues have fallen there by about 5%. So the first one that we look at is transient occupancy tax. And let me just say this here. We put this graph in here which breaks down the general fund revenues by type. And the purpose of this graph is really just to show you, if you take, starting up there in the upper right hand of the clock there, you've got transient occupancy tax. So that's 27%. You've got property taxes make up 21% of your budget. You've got sales tax make up 16%. And then you've got Measure V that makes up another percentage that's not on the slide for some reason. But if you add all those together, the point being, those are about 3/4 of your general fund revenue sources. So those top 3 lines on the previous page, or top 4 lines, that's really what's the driver in your revenues. So we'll just kind of look individually at what we're thinking for each of those. The transient occupancy tax, we think probably from an occupancy standpoint, you're probably going to be pretty stable. I don't see anything that would really markedly change occupancy. What we are expecting is some increase in the average daily rate, so that's why you get that 2.5% bump overall in transient occupancy tax. And this is something that we also looked at HDL to ascertain what these forecasts will look like, and they would agree with that. Property taxes is really pretty simple. We took property tax, applied the Prop 13 2% cap to them, the cap and the growth rate. So that gives you a 2% increase next year in property taxes. Sales tax, put that at 2.1%. Baker Tilly had looked at this and they had it a little bit higher at 2.9%. If you look at what HDL is projecting statewide, they had 3.8% increase in sales tax last year, and then this year is supposed to be 0.4%. Sonoma is usually going to outpace the state in general, so took that up to about 2.1%. But again, when we're forecasting, I'm always wanting to be, I'm always going to go to the low side. They may come in better than that, but for sake of conservancy, we're going to keep that at the lower side. And then your Measure B, that half-cent local tax, that's expected to go up a bit. Sorry, we're losing our slides here. So then we start moving down into other fees. So we have the EMS fees that we get, ambulance billing revenue. That we kept totally flat. I don't see any reason for that going up. I don't see any reason for that going down. Fees and charges for services. So those, we took down those estimates just a little bit. We see some building development revenues or building development activity going down just a little bit in the next year, or it might have been a little bit higher in past years. So we actually took down some things like permitting fees and those type of things. So you get a marginal decrease in those fees and charges for services. And then you've got franchise fees. So franchise fees, franchise fees, we have those actually going up a little bit. So some of the things you have in there, you've got Comcast, you've got Sonoma Garbage, and I believe there was a contract that was just renegotiating with Sonoma Garbage. So we see some increase in franchise taxes in the next year. Business license tax is just, we have it going up very marginally at 2%. And then you've got a couple things here that have really hurt. My apologies. So you can see that you had that ARPA tax that we received over the last 2 years. That's gone from $1.3 million. It's dropped to zero because we're no longer getting that money. So that probably, I would imagine, was used for more one-time sources. But we knew that was coming, so that's dropped out. That is a big piece of what's causing that 5% drop there. The other thing that's causing a bit of a drop in that other revenues category, one of the sources that we have in there was the SAFER grant. So we used to get about $490,000, I think, in the SAFER grant. That went away. So that's also causing you a big drop. So between those two sources, that's what's causing a lot of your drops in revenues compared to last year. All right, now let's take a look at the expenditure side. Again, you've got about a 4% overall expenditure rate, which is not very high at all, actually. Personnel costs are going up by 3%. So personnel costs are what you would imagine. The salaries and wages is a big driver in there. Now, if you look at your graph, when we say it's going up 3%, we mean it's going 3% by that column that says amended. So the amended is takes the original proposed budget from July 1st of last year, and then any adjustments that you've made during the year hit that amended line. So the reason I tell you that is if you go from the proposed budget from 2022-23 and you compare it to the proposed budget for this year, it actually goes up by about 8%. So if you remember, we ratified some MOUs with the bargaining unions in this last year, and we captured those effects in the amended budget. So that's why it's only going up 3% compared to the amended. We've already caught some of those effects. Looking at PERS for the city, you're actually in very good shape on the miscellaneous side. You're about 81% funded, which by California standards is pretty good. Your normal cost for PERS is staying pretty much level in the next year. The other bright spot that I will say that you have in the future with personnel costs is that the city is moving continuously to new employees that are on the PEPR tier. So that's the new, less expensive defined benefit tier of PERS. So those classic employees are retiring and dropping off, and that's going to continue to bring down your costs. So when you look at when CalPERS set their rates, they base it on 2 years ago. They have to have an actual year to do it. And when I looked at your valuation report from 2 years ago, you're actually 50-50 split at that point between PEPR and Classic. And my understanding is that you're well below that now. So that's going to be a bit of a bright spot for you. PERS UAL, a lot of that is on the safety side, and that's actually down a little bit. So that's the unamortized actuarial liability. And basically, what that means is that PERS sets a target of 6.8 for their returns. If they miss that target, they're going to amortize that, and that line's going to go up. If they exceed the target, they're going to actually give you a negative number. So that can go either way in that one. But again, as you start to move more and more into the PEPR tier, that's going to become less and less of an issue for you.
Quick question. So you said it's amortized over how many years?
I think they do gains and losses at 20 years. And then professional services. Professional services came down actually by about 10% there, $148,000. So professional services came down because that's got things like you have your election costs in there, which every other year you've got an election and we budget that. So those came down by a little over $70,000. You had a $30,000 executive recruitment in there last year. That obviously is not put into this year's budget. And then there was also some things that were added, I think, at the midterm budget last year into the amended budget. There were some costs added in there for general fund study, ordinance, sign ordinance, and then a downtown parking study, I believe. So those things occurred in 22-23. Those won't be rebudgeted in 23-24. So that's why you're seeing your professional services fall off a bit. And then we'll look at your safety. So your police contract with sheriff, that went up by 5%. Pretty easy calculation there. That's per the agreement. And then the next thing that you have there is Sonoma Valley Fire, and that contract has got that cost there's got two components to it. So the actual cost of the contract went up by about 6%. And then you've also got some personnel that were add-ons. I think there's 3 firefighters that were added on for the engines. So a couple things are happening there. First of all, the cost of those have gone up. So they went up from about $420,000 to $490,000. And then last year, we actually had the SAFER grant. Portion of that was being used on the Sonoma Valley Fire side to pay for, I think, 35% of those firefighters. That went away. So now we have the full cost of that. So that also drove up, that added, I think, about $60,000 to that cost. And then you've got operating costs. Operating costs went up by $342,000, but a lot of that is when we get into the departments, you'll see that the city manager is going to talk about some additional funding that we put in there for homelessness. I think that was $260,000. And then, you're also seeing some kind of smaller components of operating costs that are going on. So workers' comp's gone up by 16%. You're seeing property insurance and general liability insurance go up, which is something you're seeing California-wide. And that's something that, unlike your personnel costs, is probably not a bright spot for you. I just arriving in this morning, I heard that another insurance company's pulled out of California now. Yeah, exactly. So that's not a good thing. But anyway, so that's going to continue to put upward pressure on insurance. And then transfer CIP, we'll talk about those when we talk about CIPs there. So your next slide, if you could actually see it, it just shows you what the breakdown is.
It's just to keep people,
Right.
keep you awake. It's a tactic.
Yeah, and you can see there, like every city, about 50% of your costs in the city are from safety services, which is what you expect in the general fund. And then those operating costs and personnel costs making up another 41% of that. So that's how your budget divides up.
do have this too.
Yeah, there's hard copies in the back.
There's hard copies in the back,
All right.
underneath,
So we're on page 14
on
now.
the chair.
That's general funds, one back, actually, that's fine. This is just the breakdown by department. And not really much to say here because we're gonna walk through these departments individually, so you'll get an idea of what's happening in each department. And then I think, final slide, I believe. So general fund reserve, so, anyways. If you look at page 16, you can see your general fund reserve there. So this again is I know showing you a deficit is not a positive, but this is some good news I think for you. I mean the city's been very good about putting aside general fund reserve. So right now you've got $11.7 million in your general fund reserve. So by policy, you want to maintain $1.5 million, just a static amount, and then we try to put away 2 months worth of expenses, so 17%. So just, again, back of the envelope, you've got a $25 million budget. We put $5 million down with that $1.5 million. The healthy reserve would be $6.5 million. You guys got 11.7. We have $11.7 million. You're in a very good spot. And what that does is, I mean, money is time. So yeah, money's time. So yes, you've got some things that you can look at. Your expenditures are not so robust that I could see a lot of fat there that could be cut. I mean, everywhere that I've worked, whenever we go in and we have a budget deficit, the first place we go is expenses. And really the first place we go is salary and wages. That's where the costs are. And, you usually have, vacant positions or something like that. I think our, FTE count here in rough numbers is about 42 individuals. You don't have a lot of cutting that you can do there. It's just not there. So, there's two levers. There's decrease the expenditure level, there's increase the revenue level. So that gives us some time to look at the revenues and see what happens there. And I just kind of looking back at your revenue history, like going back a couple of years, your revenues have actually grown substantially. I mean, if I go back 2 or 3 years, your revenues overall were only about $20 million. So, those have grown. So I'm not familiar enough with the city of Sonoma to know what your sensitivity is, economic sensitivity, but I would imagine when the economy picks up after this little rough period we're going to have, you're probably going to see these revenues come up. I would imagine, I couldn't predict what it will be, but I would imagine it'll come up. Point being, though, is that even after taking out $1.1 million here, you've got $10.6 million remaining. So you got 10 years to figure it out. Rough math.
Well, we got to maintain our budget. Yeah,
Of course.
we actually have 3 or 4 years to figure it out.
Completely joking. Yeah, no, I think you've definitely got some time to sort out this problem here. So I think you are, even though you have an operating deficit, you're in a good place going forward here. A lot of cities do not have this luxury. So hopefully I end with some good news there.
So the next section is staffing, but before we go there, I just want to stop and see if there's any
Yeah.
questions.
And just we're gonna have the staff sort of do the kind of breaks for questions that make sense as they progress. And then as far as the public is concerned, we're gonna wait till the end, so please take notes. So we're not gonna stop and start. So, because you might have questions on several things and we wanna keep the flow kind of going a little bit, all right? So just so you know how we're gonna approach this. So at this point, any questions from the council up to this point? Questions? Mr. Wellington.
On the SAFER grant, do we anticipate it not continuing, or do we put our head in the sand on that? I mean, that's a hard one to answer for you two, but it's like...
Yeah, I went back and looked at the staff report when that was approved, and it was a 3-year grant, my understanding, and in that staff report it talked about it going away at some point. So it was a discretion of the council to maintain those 3 firefighters through that grant. And what you're going to hear later when fires go through their department is plans they have for revenue generations to help support that cost. It won't happen this year, but things like the tax measure and other things that the fire department's working on, that they're looking to figure out how to offset those 3 additional positions. But in the short term, this year, 23-24, there's no additional funding for it, so it would be fully general fund funded.
Thank you.
Okay, any further questions before we go on, Ms. Ferrarinos?
So, so I have two questions. So first of all, why in California use S&P and not NASDAQ? As far as, you know, what you're looking in regards to?
Yeah, I didn't make that decision, that was within the May revision report, so why they use S&P, it's probably just a broader.
It is broader, but
It's broader index, so that's why they use, why they don't use Dow, I don't know, but that's,
Yeah.
they said, but it was interesting, they said it actually tracked very closely with the S&P, so.
Oh, they do, okay.
But the S&P and Dow too, I think track very, very closely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the second one in regards to, so this is the 1-year look, and so on an ongoing basis or going forward, are we gonna be able to see, and maybe it's further down, I didn't see it though, like 3-year forecasts, so that then we can account for things that are going away, so you know that, yes, we're looking at this, the budget for this year, but in 2025, this funding's gonna go away, and then the list of possible, you know, fundings that are available to make up some of the deficit from grants and other.
Yes, Councilmember, you will see that, so we, as we go through the process, start putting together the actual budget book, that's, I think, within the budget book, we actually do a 5-year projection for
Oh,
you.
good.
So that's exactly why, it's just so that we account for things that we know that are gonna happen within that 5-year forecast period. But we didn't have that for this meeting.
Any further questions on this section up to now? Mr. Ding?
All right. Yes. First of all, I give you a little bit of a simple one, and I hope that is typo. And the page 38.
We're not there yet. I don't believe it.
No, I think I ended.
Already.
We're not there, so we're just up to the point that we've discussed right now, is all we're taking questions at this point. So we're not on 38. When we get to page 38, we'll fix that one.
We already, mentioned.
We did?
Yeah.
I'm sorry
Yeah.
if that's my error, but
We're at page 15, but I think
Yeah,
you
we're-
did mention page 38.
Yes.
I see, I
Yeah.
see. I understand, okay.
But it's the simple, it's
Okay,
it's
what is
okay.
it?
The other one is formula is wrong, and the double counted. First column, that is maybe you can Excel sum it, double counted. We never gonna pay city attorney $800,000. Maximum is $400,000. First column,
Oh, I see, the 21, 22
Yes,
actuals?
yeah.
I don't.
yeah, just simply remove it. Yeah, just simply.
Oh,
remove
you know what, Councilmember, you're exactly right. That was an Excel function. Yeah, you're
Yes.
exactly right. That's
Yeah,
supposed to be 400.
I treat it as a typo. Yeah.
Yep, you're right. Good catch.
That is to fix it. Another thing is, that is a big one. Hold on a second. If we look at the page 7, citywide expenditure. So the bottom line, total in the citywide expenditure doesn't sum up with the and above items. And also, I know you just came here.
Yeah.
We never got in a $62 million, never.
Okay.
Maximum is in a $40
Yeah,
million.
I think the 62 was,
Yeah.
that was my fault. I put the wrong number in the slide.
No problem, no problem. Yeah, this one is very important.
Yep.
We need a fix. And also, here you didn't print that out. Before that, the package, you have another so-called supplementary in the summary. That file, that is number is correct.
Yeah.
Should be move that number to here and then match it. Otherwise,
Right.
this sheet doesn't make sense.
Right.
Yeah.
And also, we never spend $62 million. I got a surprise first.
Yeah, you gave him a
Wow.
heart attack right there.
Got it.
Yeah. And for those of you who don't know, our resident accountant is, of course, Councilmember Ding, who we can thank for our very substantial reserves, because he is quite good at being an excellent craftsman of the budget. Thank you, Thank you, Mr. Ding, you're absolutely right on all accounts. And we'll of course fix those things.
Yep.
Anything else before we go forward? Okay, great, thanks, and thanks, Jack. I know many people in Sonoma will thank you for their tax expertise as well. Okay. All right, so we'll go forward.
Looks like the slides are working now, we'll see how this goes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we'll move on to staffing. So as part of the analysis last year, when Mark Linder was here, the interim city manager, and I worked with him during our overlap to look at the staffing levels, staffing structure, as we move into this next year. And there were some changes that are being proposed that are in the budget. So all the information that you see in the next slide are incorporated into the budget. This is a summary showing staffing levels by year over the past couple of years. As you can see, with all the changes we've made, it really is basically a 0.25 difference how it ends up being. From a financial standpoint, we did look at the numbers. This year is going to be a little odd because of the transition with overlapping people going out and coming in, but over time that new org structure will be a cost savings down the road. These are the changes that are proposed in this current budget. In the finance department, we're eliminating the administrative service director and the deputy finance director and adding just a finance director for that department to oversee the staff there and work with the staff. On the public works side, we're taking 2 part-time maintenance workers and making 1 full-time position, and then changing 1 maintenance worker to a senior maintenance worker to have the structure in place to support our field crew, similar to other field crew sections. On the building and planning side, this is a big change here where we've added a community development director, which is currently in recruitment and hopefully have a selection shortly for that position. As with that addition of that position, they'll oversee the planning and building functions of the city. So that will mean we'll eliminate the planning and community service director and the building service director, development service director. As part of that change, we'll need to add a building official underneath the community development director, and we'll be changing the one of our associate planner positions, which is vacant now, to a senior planner. So we have some structure in that department. We're also recommending an addition of an admin assistant in that planning section. And then finally, we do have a slight change in the city manager's office of the PIO to full-time based on kind of the programs and projects we have coming up that we'll need to work on. So all these changes currently have been evaluated by me and Mark Linder, and we kind of worked through it. We looked at the costs, what impacts that would have, and those are all built in, as I mentioned before, in this budget. I've included an org chart. It's a little hard to see on the screen, but if you do have it printed out, there was some question about how this might all lay out in terms of structure. So if there's a question about reporting structure, this is the proposed view moving into 23-24 year. That is the staffing. Do you have any? This might be a good place to just check in on questions on in terms of
Any
staffing.
questions on the staffing, the org chart from council division?
So what is the overall change in personal costs with these? It's about flat or?
It's about flat, yeah. So there's, I think it was in the five digit, $10,000 to $20,000, but yeah, so it's essentially flat.
And then in the next page, on page 18, how many of these positions are part-time? It's not, because I think our sustainability coordinator is part-time. You know, that would be helpful to know too,
Yeah,
even though that's
okay.
not, but that'd be good to know.
We'll mark that on here,
Okay,
on the
thank
future
you.
one, maybe a little asterisk or something.
Parks and cemeteries.
I have a question. On the, something we talked about with Mr. Linder was being able to flex some of the time allotted for the public works to account for our weekends and our heavy visitors times. Is that part of the part of this with the full time and being able to extend the time? Is that included?
turning 2 part-timers into a full-timer. Yes, it is.
And so that will extend to help cover some of the weekend and
Correct.
Tuesday nights and,
That's the plan.
okay, that's the plan. Thank you.
Great question.
Thanks.
I have a, oh, good.
Yeah. Ron and then Jack, please.
Just a quick question, back on page 17, when you say a change or the addition of admin assistant and planning, is that forthcoming? Because we have 2 individuals, Jade and Matt. So has that position been filled, or am I calling out names that don't?
No, this would be new because we have admin on the building side, so this would help support the planning side.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Ding?
My question is regarding and the police and the chief, and we have administration assistant. That is between the police chief and the city, right? This project, could you please explain?
Yes, thank you. So the police chief and fire chief are both through contracts. The
Yes.
Admin assistant under the police is a city employee who is funded through our funds and reports as a city employee.
Okay, thank you.
And I think what I'll do too is, similar to the part-time, I'll call out the fire chief and police chief separately, just so it doesn't look like they're employees of the city, they're under contract.
Thank you.
Okay. Great questions, and we'll move on.
Okay, so now we have departments. We're going to go department by department to talk through essentially what accomplishments for the previous year, some goals for the next year moving forward, and then their expenditures for that the department. The goal is to highlight any big changes departments are bringing forward as part of this budget, so you have awareness of what's changing and why. This is a list of the various departments that we'll go through in that order. And we'll start off with the city council just as an example and kind of walk through how we'll do this template as we move through. And each department's going to come up and present their own. Essentially, the accomplishments for city council, hired city manager, congratulations on that. Housing element, the strategic plan, working on the pedestrian improvements. So a lot of these things that you're well aware of that are have been either completed or moving forward in a substantial way. The bathrooms to the plaza, which was a great success, and many more. The goals, this is again a recap of the goals that the council set forth earlier this year, so I don't want to go back through these again. But again, the key is to keep an eye on these goals, making sure we as staff understand what those goals are and are moving those forward in a meaningful way within the budget, but also in practicality. This is the chart I wanted to just pause on, because you'll see this for every department, and so I thought it might be good to have Chuck walk through how this chart is laid out, just so when you see this over and over and over again, you'll understand how to use it and how valuable it is for you.
Yeah, so this is something that you'll see it's taken right out of the budget books that we produce every year, so we kind of try to keep everything uniform. So for every department, you'll have salary and wages. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. That's full-time, part-time employees that you have. And then employee benefits, again, I think pretty self-explanatory. That includes everything from medical to PERS, the normal cost that we pay. And then we break out the liability, the PERS liability there. For most of these departments, it's probably going to be pretty small, and I'm not sure what the purpose was for breaking that out, but that's broken out individually. Professional services are those things that you would think of that we use, like for the finance department, we use a CPA firm, Baker Tilly, to do our audit, so that's going to be what you would see in professional services. Property services is your portion as a department of property insurance is primarily what that is. And then some departments also have custodial and building maintenance costs that are built into that property service lines. Operations is just that's all the operating costs for your department that don't fall neatly into those areas. So you can think of things, anything, it could be anything from gas to anything you can use in your operations. And then supplies are usually, the things that you're going to use up in the portion of the year. So again, things like staples, paper, that kind of stuff is going to go into supplies. And then the internal service and capital projects for the operating department is primary internal service. So we talked about the internal service ones a little bit earlier. So those are things like management information systems, vehicle replacement fund, those kind of things are allocated out to the individual departments, so they kind of capture what their true cost is. So that's an explanation of what each of those objects is.
So, for example, on here, there's an increase in the operations line item, and that was to reflect a more accurate cost of the various conferences that the city council goes to, big cities, and the mayors and council members meetings. So just making sure that we have an appropriate level in there moving forward into next year.
Question.
Any place, will there be a chart showing the allocation of staff across the respective departments at the admin level and other positions in the city?
In terms of where they're charged to?
Yeah.
We could.
Or a percentage of their
Their
salary and benefits that are charged off to the different programs?
We could do that, yeah. I think this is a good example where we have one staff member, 30% of their time is charged to this account. So we can identify that based on staffing. That's helpful too.
Yeah, I think that is helpful. That could be something we want to take a look at. Good question. Yeah. Patricia, you have a question?
Just looking at this fiscal year 20, I know it's passed, but why was the employee benefits so high in that year relative to salaries?
Which you're looking at?
2021.
The additional.
I didn't catch that before I looked at it. I wasn't concentrating on
Going
2021.
back to the actual.
Oh.
You know, council member, I don't know. I'd have to go
Yeah.
back and pull the detail on it to see
But
what
that is
see
a
what
real
popped
number.
up. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So benefits are those that are signed up for, yeah, so these benefit lines, employee benefits, depends on what council members are signed up for health benefits. Sometimes
That's what I thought it might be.
council members don't sign up, so you'll see in this current year,
Right.
compared to last year, more council members are signed up for health benefits than the previous year.
Yeah, so in the proposed budget, that jump there, we could account for. That was, 3 council members versus 2 in the last mixed of council that are taking benefits, so that's why that went up by that much. Is that what you were asking? I'm sorry, I thought you were asking about
Well, I
that.
think it's
Well, then that makes
similar
sense for me to see the variation.
Yeah.
in
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Any other questions on this budget? So I'll move to the city clerk, and Rebecca, do you want to take this one?
So in the city clerk's office, some of the accomplishments for 2023, over the last several years, we've been really looking at accessibility and public transparency. That being said, one of the biggest things that we haven't talked about that you're going to be seeing some promotion on is we just implemented a public comment tracker that's directly tied to our civic web portal. That someone can go in and just click a button and it can automatically be assigned to a council agenda item or a commission agenda item. That way we make sure we're capturing those. So we'll be seeing some promotion on that. We implemented the temporary artwork in the council chambers. We've done 2 shows and we're getting ready to do the 3rd one. And the other one big thing that we're really excited about that you don't really see is we cataloged and archived all the historic records using industry standards and preservation techniques. So this, the safe in the conference room upstairs was full of very old historic documents that were just put in there in boxes. So now we have cataloged all of those and moved them over to acid-free. I think we found General Vallejo's death certificate, or there was some, there's some very historic documents that we have now cataloged and we're preserving properly. One of the other big projects was the recruitment and onboarding of not only the council members, but 33 commissioners and committee members. And then some of just the numbers, you can see them here. We've done 19 regular council meetings, including all of the follow-up, the noticing, 19 special council meetings, and then some cultural and fine arts, which we're also responsible for at this time. And then one thing that's not included here is we've also done over 82 public records requests that we've responded to. Some goals for the upcoming, again, continuing in that transparency line. We have budgeted to upgrade our records management and archive software. And we've selected one that we're going to be, that'll include a public portal to be able to make those more transparent and accessible to members of the public. We'll continue with the temporary artwork program so we can memorialize that. the implementation of a new contract and agreement management policy and process. And then one of the big things, which is actually where our one enhancement, or major, I would say major, not that much, but our to our budget this year is currently our municipal code is what's called a legacy platform. I think it's called it's HTML based, and so with an enhancement of just under $7,000, we can move to a new platform, making it more accessible and ADA compliant. We're compliant now, but it's getting into the new accessibility rules and laws. So we will, that's one of our goals this year, is to make that transfer from the legacy platform to the new platform. And that's really the only major change in our budget, other than the decrease for elections. We hopefully won't be having one this year. So that did, you see a $74,000 decrease there. And other than that, the only, like I said, the only enhancement is to add that municipal code migration and enhancement to make it more accessible. If anyone has questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Any questions for the city clerk on this portion? Okay, moving on.
Okay, on the city manager budget, I just focused on the goals here moving forward. Obviously, the budget's a key thing, goal for the city manager over this next, moving forward. Identifying housing solutions and funding strategies. We do have some key positions that obviously need to be filled, finance director being one, and then the community development director, and then as you saw in the org chart, some additional follow-up positions on that. And then working on the homeless action plan and updating emergency procedures in line with the council goals, and you'll see that in the funding element. So one of the big changes in the budget for the city manager's office is you'll notice the 2,386% increase line item for operations, which essentially is the $260,000 that got moved there for the homeless funding. So we moved that in the city manager's budget for me to oversee and make sure that gets allocated appropriately. That's what that big change is there, and the big change to this budget. We also added some additional funding for knowing that we will probably need to go out to voters for some revenue initiatives, looking at what options we have out there, making sure that we have the funding in place to move that forward quickly and be as nimble as possible over this next year. So those are the two big changes to the city manager budget.
Okay, any questions on the city manager's budget?
And I will, as directed by the mayor and the council earlier, when you saw the homeless strategic plan, we will bring back some ideas and options for how to distribute those funds to our local service providers and moving that forward. So we didn't miss that. We just didn't feel like this was the place to have that conversation right now, but
Right.
we will make sure to bring that back.
Right, but it's in the budget.
It's in the budget.
All right,
And
finance.
I would just say that on revenue, that's a very minimal number. That could definitely go.
In terms of holding.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, it's a good placeholder, but it's, but okay, go.
Although it's a minimum number, but it's a history make. We contributed so much money to all the local homeless service provider.
Yeah, no, I was talking a different thing. Not the homeless, I was talking about the polling. That is a minimum number,
No.
not the homeless.
Right now,
Okay,
right now I'm talking about
The
homeless
okay,
because that is additional.
Yes.
Although this number also is not big, but that is the
Yeah.
needed.
yeah, very good. Quite right, okay. Great, let's go on to finance.
Okay, so I don't have as grand of goals here.
Can I ask one quick question? Where does the, I'm sorry, because I keep looking for it, the polling, where is that show, which line item is the polling under?
That would be in
operation?
operational.
It is an operation.
Yeah.
All right.
So we had some other decreases in that account, plus the 260 plus the operational, but we also reduced some other contracts that we didn't need anymore that were in place. So the net result is an additional 271 increase.
So we've submitted, we're catching up on a backlog of audits, a couple years behind. So we've submitted 1920 and 2021 audits to Baker Tilly. We're going through those with them now, so we hope to have those, I'm hoping we get those wrapped up in the next few months and get those to the council. I'm not sure why those were behind, but that's definitely probably my top priority is to get caught up on those. And then we assisted in the implementation of OpenGov in the last year, and then also an update from the master fee schedule. In the next couple months, for myself, as I mentioned, completing work on past audits is probably number one. We are addressing some issues that we had with bank reconciliations, so we were doing those annually, which is not a best practice, so we need to get to the point where we're doing those monthly. And then I'm also going to be looking to find a new finance director for the city, so that'll be part of my work here. And then our expenses overall have gone down by $141,000. And as you can see, the biggest change there is in those top two line items of salaries and wages and employee benefits. So we had a assistant city manager previously that was allocated a little over 90% to the finance department, so that's been taken out. We had a finance manager previously in the finance department, so those two positions are gone, and then we're adding a finance director. So we'll take some of those savings and use them to fund the finance director position. But overall, that's going to have some staff savings to you. So overall, we'll reduce our budget by $141,000 next year.
Any questions on this portion from the council? Yes, Ms. Rodriguez.
Just on the OpenGov, that's your financial analysis software. What is that?
I think that's permitting
Permitting.
software.
Permitting
Oh, it's
software.
permitting.
Yeah.
So-
And so, okay, so, and where is, how much goes to within the system of finance to training of utilizing softwares for efficient tracking of the finances? Is that part of this? I mean, what system are you using to
We
actually?
use Springbrook as our accounting system. The staff is very familiar with it. I don't think we have a lot of training on it. Say,
It's
but
not needed.
no. I think I think they've talked about going to a new accounting system at some point, but I wouldn't recommend doing that until you got a new finance director in and that person had some time in the seat, because that's a very, very disruptive undertaking.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, yes.
Real quick question.
Yeah.
Back on the late audits, what's the liability there for us as far as the exposure that we haven't done it now for 3 or 4 years?
That's a good question. It does not look good. I mean, you should never be behind in your audits at all. I suppose there could be some implication from the state. I just don't know what those would be. I've never honestly run across this where you're behind audits by more than really a year. But it does happen. It does happen, but just normally not this extreme. So roundabout way of telling you, I'm not sure what the liability from that would be. Eventually, if you were going out to issue bonds, and you're dealing with underwriters, and they see 3 years or 4 years of audits that haven't been completed, you would be very fortunate if you get the bonds, and if you did, you'd get them at a very, very high cost. Yeah. So it's not, it's not a good thing. The underwriters now, you guys are probably familiar with ESG. So one of the G in that's governance, and that's one of the things they look at. I mean, if they're looking at you as a city and you don't have financial controls like that, or you're unaudited, it's not going to go well for you. But other than that, as far as what could happen to us as far as penalties or something, I don't know of any. And I don't know that you're going out for bonds anytime soon. But.
Thank you.
So, is there a government mandate to report our audits? Is there an overseeing agency? I know there is with school districts, that you have to submit your unaudited actuals and your audit and all of that annually. Is there an agency that oversees that?
Yeah, usually for finance, the only agency that I normally submit our audited financials to are to the underwriters, because they have to track that, and you also have requirements under the SEC that you have to report. So yeah.
Well, and so is there the cost of getting those audits done? Is that included in here somewhere?
Yeah, I think in the budget there is included $75,000 for Baker
For
Tilly, and that's
Baker
part of the
Tilly
work
to
that
do
they're
it,
doing.
and what would be the time, I mean, obviously, we're looking at an annual budget, but what do you see as a projected timeline to complete those 3 audits?
Well, the 2 that we've submitted to them, I'm hoping that we can get those done in the next 3 months. Because we have to, you know, as long as we don't have any major disagreements between the auditors and us, it should be a process that we can wrap up relatively quickly. But even once we have the actual financials, then we have to go through and do the analysis, and then I have to write the management discussion analysis and then publish and all that. So it'll take some time. So like I say, I think we'd be doing well if we wrap those up in 3 months.
Okay.
But those are just the 2 years we talked about. We still have another audit or 2 in there too, so it's going to take a little while. Your new finance director is going to be busy.
Also, I want to suggest, because previous years we hired a company in Sacramento, and right now you took over, you know, this position, and I suggest maybe you can and work with other company and see and what they, you know, service, what kind of service they can provide.
Are you talking about
Some of the
different auditors?
comparison audit, yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we could, yeah, I don't know if Baker Tilly's a recent auditor or not. I don't know when they came on board.
All right, any other finance questions? All right, so we are moving on to legal services.
So legal services incorporates 2 things. One is our attorneys, David, our attorney that sits at council, but also our code enforcement is included in here as well. So that's what this budget encompasses moving forward. So it's pretty, we kept this flat this year in talking with legal, but also with code enforcement. Bob is doing our code enforcement. Yeah, so this is a pretty simple one. And at some point we do get reports on the code enforcement activities and priorities, and so all those are directed essentially at a policy level, so in terms of where we want to focus priorities. So I'll be working on that over the next few months, and then I can report that out to council in terms of code enforcement activity and what we're seeing. A lot of this also has fee recovery elements to it with code enforcement actions. So.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask, is what's the revenue associated with this?
It's not a guarantee on all this, but there are options, but I can get that back to you in terms of what we saw last year, in terms of what our recovery rates were, so we can get a sense moving forward.
Okay. All right. Any questions on that before we move over to Mr. Berger, who's moved into the horseshoe
That is a bigger
here?
one.
Guest speaker.
Guest speaker, okay. All right.
All right, for Public Works Administration General Fund, on slide 40. Just some of the accomplishments of admin engineering. As every year, we're working on our stormwater discharge permit. We also provided on-call city engineer, on-call development engineer for development projects, working underneath the city's right-of-way encroachment permits. We passed Resolution 58-2022, which I'll talk about in a couple of minutes. As a member of the city's OpenGov online permitting team, we worked with building and planning to get that system up and running this year. That's great. It lets developers launch projects electronically, and a lot of really nice follow-up aspects. Communication-wise, launched new Parks, Rec, and Open Space Pros Commission, and completed the first Traffic Safety Committee meeting before that disbanded, and then that is the last commission to get up and running again. We'll be having our second meeting with the new commission soon. And then completed engineering, design, or started construction, one of those 3, on the following projects relative to citizen safety. 4 pedestrian crossings on Broadway, which I'll talk about in a couple of minutes, safety lighting at Verano Highway 12. 2 AED units will be installed this fiscal year, one at the Bocce Cords at Depot, and the other one will be installed here in the next couple of weeks at the plaza. And then traffic calming measures that were really successful at 5th Street East and Napa Street. Next slide, for goals. We're going to pursue council goals related to Park Street Cemetery water as outlined in the council's strategic goals, such as provide support to ops for Depot Park restroom rehab, and more traffic safety and calming projects. Serve the needs of the citizens of the city of Sonoma, work on our infrastructure, city-owned building, storm drain. This year, we're gonna be updating the city's concrete program in partnership with regional agencies, develop required grant applications to address trash capture for our stormwater permit, complete pedestrian crossings on Broadway, 4 locations. Most of the engineering's already done on that, and the safety lighting at Verano and Highway 12 ongoing. Complete our first on-call concrete projects, construction, that would be on the sidewalk in front of the Mason Abbey House and the intersection in front of Union 76 at 2nd Street West in Napa. Regarding our expenses, we're showing 2 new expenses this year. One is a temporary office trailer to facilitate a little bit of increase in labor force at City Hall. And the other one is the on-call city engineer. However, the on-call city engineer is actually not a new expense. We're spending the same amount of money that we spent last year, but it wasn't budgeted last year for some reason. And then, are there any questions on engineering admin?
Any questions?
On
for
slide
Mr.
43,
Gerber?
we just showed the 2.
Okay, Ms. Rodriguez has a question.
So I have a question in regards to the commissions that are under your purview, and it seems to me that the Climate Action Commission should be under your purview as well, since so much of what they're doing relates to vehicle miles traveled, relates to looking at all of the infrastructure within the city and how to reduce, our climate impact based on infrastructure. It seems to be kind of a commission that's kind of hanging out there that's very, very important. I know you'll hear me talk about this a lot, but it's very important, but it's not really attached to any particular department within the city.
Well, it's in planning, and a lot of the action items that are undertaken by the commission are planning related, long-term vision.
Yeah.
I'm a little, but Travis, he's our,
He's under planning,
yeah, and so I think that's primarily why the CACC ended up there.
yeah. There's a lot
Or
of
the
overlap.
CAC.
Yeah, there seems like that there's a lot of things that actually affect actual public works implementation.
There
I
are,
understand.
and we collaborate a lot,
Okay.
Travis and I, and Travis and my department, yeah.
And I'd echo that. I think when we get a new community development director on board too, that
That'll
position
bring
will
it.
help support that committee and make sure that that committee has the resources it needs.
That's a great question, though.
Great,
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah.
Because you're right, there crossover across all the departments, not just building. or,
Yeah, because you're more on the implementation
Implementation.
side.
Right.
So, yeah,
They're the ones with the vision.
right. And you're the one with the shovel.
We hope that vision to be implemented.
Yes, connect those two. yeah.
By all means.
Okay, any other questions so far? Yes, Mr. Rodriguez.
I believe it is going to be cost related, but on Broadway, it's Caltrans. Why is Caltrans not picking up the,
I plan to send them a bill.
okay?
Yeah. and I've
For the
discussed that-
crossings.
I've discussed that with Mark and just a little bit with David and also with the mayor.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, so we hope to.
And it's not just the RRFBs, it's also the intersection work in front of Union 76. Yeah. And I mean, I've had discussions with them about it, but
Are you
they
talking
haven't
to
given me
about that?
access to their checkbook.
Okay, thank you.
And
Yeah.
we are working on that diligently. City manager and I now have a direct contact in the governor's office who's gonna hear from me more and more until things start
Yeah.
moving.
I want to emphasize too, I want to pursue a partnership.
Yes.
Sure.
And that's what I've told them too, this, that we're willing to work with you, but,
Right
come
now,
on.
we're an orphan.
Yes,
Yeah, we are charging forward with both of those projects.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to give them, the staff at the governor's office, a complete vision of what our city looks like with this sort of river of state running through it and how difficult it is for us to navigate without this partnership, so we're
Thank you.
working on it. Thank you. Okay, please.
So moving right along, getting into streets operations, general fund, just maintaining the city streets, through coordination with our 3 different branches and also our street sweeping. Timely completed repaving of utility trench cuts, and we completed 2 largest paving projects that we've done in recent years. Coordinated and implemented storm prep and maintenance, including responsive recovery for a significantly wet winter. Installed new traffic signs and pavement markings to reduce vehicle speed and calm traffic at strategic locations, primarily 5th Street East and Napa. Reduced fire fuels by just doing vegetation management. Completed our first project, and this is the resolution I talked about a couple minutes ago that we got approved by council last year, 582022, and that's at the corner of 4th Street and Lovell Valley Road, where we did a public-private partnership with the owner, developer of that property, and increase the infrastructure improvements on the frontage. Started construction of the following projects relative to citizen safety, like I discussed, 4 ped crossings on Broadway. 2 of those are underway. We're having significant utility conflicts that we're having to resolve. We got the safety lighting at Verano Highway 12, and AED units at Depot Plaza, and then also traffic calming at 5th and Napa. Operations goals: improve street sweeping by coordinating better with solid waste company for pickups, accelerate enforcement and abatement when illegal dumping occurs on city streets and sidewalks, improve pedestrian safety through the revised sidewalk trip hazard repair policy. They'll be implementing that. Update the pavement management plan. Continue to improve nighttime vehicle and pedestrian safety on city streets through improved sign and pavement marking visibility. Install the safety line at Highway 12 Verano, just a little bit more on that. That is a collaborative effort. There's 4 different agencies working on that, 5 including us, Caltrans, Sonoma County Public Infrastructure, Sonoma County Water Agency, and Sonoma County Transportation Authority. So it's an area that we realize there's issues out there, and we're really pushing the collaborative work effort and trying to get everybody to pitch in on that. And then also, we will complete all 4 pedestrian crossings on Broadway this year and install the 2 AEDs at Depot Park and Plaza. I apologize, there's one handout that was left out of your packet. I'm just passing along some information on that, but it's the streets expense by category and fiscal year totals. It's pretty much straight across the same. However, we do have an increase in fuel and tools shown and underneath supplies as a 23% increase. And that's primarily the price of fuel and tools. And that is it for streets. Are there any questions on that?
Questions on the streets? Yes.
Actually, I apologize, going back to the previous program
Sure.
and the portable building piece. It was my understanding that the portable building that's out here in the parking lot may be vacated and could be available. Is that an option?
Heck yeah. Because probably 30–40% of the cost of the new building is mobilizing it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Anyway, I just throw that out there as a possible cost savings.
that's great.
And part of that I need to bring back to the council is a plan for office space in general, because I think before we start spending a lot of capital money on space or moving, there needs to be a plan for overall.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
especially with finance changes and position changes, so expect that to come as well, but this is a piece of that. If a decision is to need a temporary, that's the budget for it.
Yep.
Very good.
Question?
Yes, please.
Because we're in a deficit, what would be the liability if we deferred slurry coating or sealing the streets for 1 year?
So,
It's a chunk of money.
yeah, that's gonna be addressed in Public Works Street, or CAP streets,
Okay,
but
we can wait.
the slurry component of that, well, it's a good question. I'm just gonna go ahead and introduce that right now. That does not have any general fund money. 0. Yeah, SB1.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you got it. Any other questions on streets?
So we're moving on to parks.
Yep.
Yay.
So going right in, 2023 accomplishments, we did the restroom upgrades at the plaza, council chamber art and cemetery sustainability study. And this is work with parks and engineering administration. Support all the Plaza City sponsored events, lots of banner work, Tuesday night market, and all seasonal activities. Assisted with completion of major tree trimming and tree removal projects at Field of Dreams and the plaza. And Parks was just, they were there for support when needed. Additionally, they did a lot of tree work in several city parks. Completed design and award of CIP DFA at the Depot Park. We just put that in there because we're not asking for money this year, but that project is up and running. It's funded this year, in this current year's budget today. Supported work for the community partners at Field of Dreams, Textune Vineyard, The Haven, Mason Abbey House, Vintage House, and other community partners. Continued formal needs assessment to drive improved asset management, inform long-range parks maintenance, planning, and identify opportunities. And realistically, I mean, my first year was just really getting involved in that, and we'll start seeing some developments on it and improvements this upcoming fiscal year. Our goals for 23-24, assist with council-related goals, working on the Plaza Master Plan and the Plaza Parking Plan, council chamber art, and complete the Depot Park bathroom rehab, which will be very similar to Carnegie. Update the needs assessment report and prepare recommendations for strategic investments in rehab projects at city parks. Support city operations and serve a coordination role for special events, and just assist on that. Complete construction of the Depot Park HVAC project. Manage, assist the contract for the Montini Preserve fuel reduction, hazard tree assessment, trail maintenance, and other. Manage and assist the contract for Nathanson Creek Oxbow demonstration garden maintenance. Moving right along with our expense by categories fiscal year. The big change from last year to this year was in our operations, 160,000 dropping down to 60,000, which really the 15% decrease was 4 tree projects that we did at the Plaza Depot and a couple other smaller ones. Any questions?
I have a question.
On parks, yeah.
Just because you know me in parks, right? So I just want to make sure that the assist with council goals related to parks includes our west side.
That'll be discussed in CIP.
It'll discuss it too.
Yep.
Okay, I'll hold my question. Any questions on this? Okay. Okay, planning and community services, Jennifer.
Okay, I'll take that until we get a planning director. So the accomplishments last year, the housing element was a big accomplishment to get that done. The in lieu fee study that you all saw just recently. The code updates, again, was a big push for the planning department over the past year and the planning commission, bringing that forward. Going to go into the goals, essentially working on streamlining the process. I know we've been talking a lot about implementing online permitting. That's heavily in the planning side, but also the building side. So ensuring that that moves forward and we find quicker ways to be more efficient about getting permits, over-the-counter permits, and other things put in place. The downtown parking studies in place, the general plan kickoff, getting that moving forward. Finalizing the climate action plan for council review and approval. How we priorities and how we spend and fund the housing trust fund. I think it's going to be key as we move forward on housing projects. And then another big one, obviously, that's top of mind right now is just making sure we're monitoring our below market rate units in the city in terms of those that are in contract, but also those that are expiring, but then and then also how we're maintaining that moving forward. So coming up with a strategy on how we do that internally. So the budget here, the big decrease is in the professional services line item, and that's because we had some one-time funding of professional contracts that were done mid-year and previous year studies, like parking plan and other things that go away. Those are one-time expenditures, but this delta is based on that change from that addition of those studies to those going away. So we're not funding those on an ongoing basis, which is why you see that drop in revenue for going forward this year. And that's
Any
Big change in
questions on
plan.
planning?
The update general plan professional services is not here.
Yeah, so one place you do see it is there was a $90,000 piece of mid-year increase that is decreasing going into next year because we're not funding it anymore. It's already been funded. So the bulk of that money, the $400,000, is already in account. It's already funded. It's not being shown in the projected budget moving forward.
Thank you.
Great. All right, so we're on to building and development services. You're on.
Good afternoon, thank you. I'd like to just touch base with on a couple of things that we've been working on over the last year in the building department. Of course, the new OpenGov electronic permitting system, many departments are involved in that, and we're sort of taking the lead. It's been a long process, over a year in development, and we still have not gone live on the building permit portion of that. We hope to do that within the next couple of months. And we also implemented an electronic plan review process and are now using specialized software for electronic plan review. And so we implemented that. We've been working on the transitioning into the new community development department, done a lot of planning and efforts in that regard. And then the other goals that are up there are related to emergency management and coordination, which we did throughout the year, and did some response work with respect to warming centers and other plans. So those are the accomplishments. Moving forward, we of course are wanting to hire a building official to take my place, and also to help with the new transitioning of the community development department. And as I indicated earlier, going live with the building permits in OpenGov is a high priority. In terms of the major, additional requests in terms of funding, we are asking for an additional $25,000 in OpenGov consulting funding so that we can utilize a consultant to help continue to implement and improve the OpenGov system as we move forward. It's not a stagnant system where we just put it in place and then watch it work. There's lots of improvements that I think we can make throughout the process, and the software is so flexible that we're able to do that and continue to make improvements. So I think it's important that we have money available in order to make that happen. The other item is there's $47,000 built into the budget for building inspector, contract building inspector services. This is so that we're able to do Friday inspections throughout the year. If we didn't have that service, what would happen is the plans examiner would have to do inspections on those Fridays, and we would be way behind on our plan review. So and right now we have a backlog in plan review services. So it's important that we have that infill for both the Fridays and as well as vacation fill and leave fill. We also plan on implementing a what's called Solar App Plus. It's a software program that allows almost immediate issuance of solar PV permits, and it's for contractors that can comply with the requirements for that program. It's a national program. It's nationwide, and we're requesting $40,000, but that is there's an offset for that. We've already received a grant of $40,000 to pay for those costs, so we'll be reimbursed for those costs. And then part of our electronic plan review, we will be printing plans for applicants, and so there's a $20,000 expense to that, but we again will be reimbursed for all of those costs by the applicant. And so those are the major additional requests with respect to the building department. There are some kind of high, if you look at the previous spreadsheet, there's some numbers in there that are sort of high with respect to the increases. I think what has happened, and I'd have to get stuff to weigh in on this, but I think what happened is under salary and wages and corresponding employee benefits, I believe that it probably included the community development director in the building department budget, and which is why you saw a $55,000 decrease in the planning budget. So it's being shown in this budget, and that's why there's a big jump there, I think, in the salary and wages.
Yeah.
Did I?
That's why they didn't pull it apart, because I think there's some idea of combining these years, so it just they didn't bother pulling it out. That's fine.
Next year, you'll see a different.
We will see
budget.
different,
Yeah.
because right now it's community development director.
Correct.
And below this, the building officer, that is in wing, another is the senior planner, right, in two positions.
The senior planner wouldn't be in this one, but it would be in the planning budget, the previous one. But yeah, you're correct, the community development director is in here, plus the new building official, which is, but it's also removing Wayne's current position, so that's the
That makes
difference.
sense.
Any further questions? Yes.
Could I go back to the part-time contract building? So is that building inspection or is that plan review?
Just building inspection.
So right now we have one individual on staff. I trust he's working 40 hours, so that doesn't cover Monday through Friday?
No, it doesn't. That position covers Monday through Thursday. The building inspector works 4 10-hour shifts, which allows us to do the building inspections Monday through Friday, plus all the code enforcement related work associated with that position. So he will be doing some minor plan, eventually he will be doing some minor plan checks, some code enforcement work related to building construction, as well as the building inspections on Monday through Friday. This is currently how we're operating right now. In order for us to do the Friday inspections, we have a contract building inspector that comes in and works part-time on Fridays to do some infill, as well as if we're doing training for several days, that position comes in. Thank you.
Very good. Any other questions? Is that it?
That's it.
Okay. All right.
So I would just say, at
Yes.
some point, to see like all of the salary changes with all the implementations, if there is anything that says, because I'm still $100,000 up from where we were. So, you know, if that's the like incremental change, then it's good to know that that's the incremental change is about 100,000, or it could be showing up
Yeah.
someplace else across the other.
And one thing you're seeing this year is the
Departments.
fact that it's all these changes aren't happening on the fiscal year, July 1, so you're seeing, waiting here hopefully till October. So as long as he'll stay, but that kind of has a little bit of overlap in terms of budgeting purposes, but in terms of actual expenses, it won't happen until obviously those positions are hired and somebody leaves. But we have to budget on the conservative side in terms of assuming his revenue is still here for a certain period of time, moving into the next budget. So when you start seeing numbers this year in terms of salaries, it's not gonna match up perfectly with that schedule I showed
Because
you.
of the
But
transition.
theoretically next year, you'll
Yeah.
start to see that normalize as we move forward.
Okay, thank you. Great, it's helpful.
Thank you. Listen. Ms. Jansen, you're on.
Good afternoon. Well, I'm here to discuss the community activities budget. Our 2022 and 23 accomplishments this year. Boy, I'm going to start with, it was just a really busy year as all of our community partners emerged from the pandemic, and everyone wanted to have an event. We hit some phenomenal numbers this year. One of our key points this year was to highlight our existing agreements with our community partners and also coordinate the annual reports that were given to the City Council. So hopefully that has provided a lot of the background going into the budget season. We entered into a 3-year agreement with our SPLASH, or Sonoma Valley Health and Recreational Partners, to sponsor and scholarships for swim lessons, with the emphasis really being on every child learns how to swim here in Sonoma Valley. So the city, we continued our work with our homeless consultants, as you saw when we brought the 3-year strategic plan. to end homelessness, which was adopted this last May. And the city implemented I feel like this was on everyone's accomplishments this year. But the reason why it's in my accomplishments is that the CFAC is going to be taking over the chamber art installations, and so they'll be working on some policy. And actually, if you go to the next slide, we can talk about this. So moving forward for 23-24, the Cultural and Fine Arts Commission, they've already started working that. We broke out into ad hoc groups. We have a public art policy group that's going to be looking at the temporary outdoor art policy, as well as the chamber art shows. Hopefully this new policy, we're asking for it to include specific sites for the location of the temporary art outdoors, as well as lighting enhancements if they're needed, and any other structural enhancements if we need to put some concrete down to support our temporary art. This Cultural and Fine Arts group will be looking at making all of the policy decisions that will actually come to City Council for final approval. We will, one of the other things I want to do is continue to build on kind of the Parks and Recreational Task Force work. We created a wonderful directory this previous year. And I think really now what our job needs to be is to really start communicating that we have this directory, working with our partners on a quarterly parks newsletter. It can include the open spaces, but just really getting those community partners that play in the park and rec space more attention with our community. And then this last year we also instituted a holiday programming, and we worked with local nonprofits. Really, this was not a cost to the city. We waived fee waivers for the use of the Plaza Amphitheater, and we hope to continue this program moving forward into the 23-24 season or fiscal year. And then again, working with our Sonoma Valley creatives, there's a lot of really interesting ideas that are floating around. And our community talks about music festivals, bigger art walks, poster contests for the Vintage Festival, as well as the Farmers Market. And so really trying to work with all of our art creatives here in the Valley to put together some policies and programs that I think will further enhance what the city in the Valley have to offer to our art community. The biggest difference in our fiscal year over year is really that piece of the homelessness funding, moving out of this budget and going into the city manager's budget. I think it's important to note that the community activities budget is not just the community fund. It also includes the budget for the city-sponsored events. So if we do everything from the Alcalde reception to the Cultural and Fine Arts, the Treasure Artist reception, the city party, the Farmers Market, any other one-off events hits this budget, as well as we do water subsidies for our community partners. And so there's a water subsidy built into this budget, as well as like the Sebastian lease hits that budget. So this is that part that I was just referencing, the Recreation and Community Fund Program. We actually have a policy which allows us to fund our community partners since we don't have a recreational department here in the city. These contracts are going to be expiring at the end of this next fiscal year. So we'll be renegotiating them going into fiscal year 24-25. But as you can see, the funding, it was a three-year contract that we currently have. The funding is included on the schedule. And I think it's important to note that typically part of this fund, it includes a 10% discretionary funding for City Council that typically has run between $25,000 and $27,000. The overall amount of the fund is about $271,000. So it leaves some residual or unallocated recreation and community services for either heritage or community events. This past year it was about $48,000. Some of that I think got allocated to help pay for the homeless consultant. But there will be some reserves here that City Council can program, and it'll probably be in the range of $60,000 to $75,000.
Any questions for Ms. Jansen? Yes.
So, I apologize, where does your salary and benefits balance in the budget?
The city manager's budget.
City manager's budget? Would it not be appropriate to have it in the, or distribute it at least based on the effort to the programs?
I'd have to look at that account. I
Okay.
can't answer that today, but
Okay.
it's going to be definitely good.
All right.
That's appropriate.
And then Jerry Wheeler's contract, is that in this particular budget?
Yes, it is. It's not part of this Recreation and Community Fund program, but it does hit general services that is part of the community activities budget.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for Ms. Jansen?
Do you think the next several years you need to increase on-site and independent contractor or employee? Because sometimes I'm the fear, a little bit overwhelming for you, especially for those kind of events.
I think that we're making some strategic changes, and I think having potentially this parks person that works weekends, if we can tag team a little bit. It's hard to work a 40-hour work week and then also work evenings and Saturdays and Sundays. So I really hope that this parks person can alleviate some of that work. We kind of tag team together, and I'd have a additional body on site on the weekends that can ensure that people are following all the different special events policies. So I think it's a good step forward.
Yes. Do you mean, and also you can take care petanque and the bocce board for them, the events? Because last time that they came to our city council, mentioned about this.
Yeah, I think the bocce and the petanque request was really, in my mind, was really centered around kind of the park maintenance part and the bathrooms.
Yes.
I think there is an area that we probably do need to put a little bit more focus on, and that is just ensuring that when they do their special events, they're following our special event policy, which includes our recycling and sorting programs and those types of things, which they haven't, to my knowledge, because we have land lease with them, I haven't really been enforcing that with them. So.
Thank you.
Thank you, and I agree. You're always there, and these are the sort of public-facing events that people recognize on the plaza. So I know it's a lot of work, and I know we put more on your plate with the art program, but we've been getting just tremendous kudos for this.
There's a lot of really positive energy out there right now.
There is,
Around
and
that,
every
which is
time
lovely.
someone starts talking to me about that four-letter word county over there, they have this lighting thing and whatever. We have this. Yeah. So, yes, thank you, Lisa, so much.
Quick question, when does the contract negotiations start for our community-funded programs?
So that's a really great question. I would like to start having some discussions with our legal team regarding the language. That'll probably start in March of next year. And then during the budget process, we will negotiate with them based on what their needs are. But again, it's about $270,000 of total funding that we have as part of this program. And so those numbers, there's not a lot of wiggle room in those numbers. But now we do, because back in, we were probably misquoted, maybe December of last year, we brought back the recreational policy, community fund policy. And now we actually have ability to include additional partners as part of that policy, because we added language to it. So I think there's some opportunities there.
Yeah, and my question is in regards to, because I believe that all of these organizations provide us with really great services. So it's not looking at in regards to cutting those services, but because many of these are nonprofit organizations too, and everybody's up against funding needs. So, more in regards to how can we support them? Analysis of their services, what it saves us, in regards, what it really, kind of looking at it from a financial benefit to the city relative to what we're funding it.
So I would say that if the word on the street is that there needs to be additional funding, then that's probably also a policy discussion. Because the policy is very specific in how we fund the program, so we just have to be careful and just timing of things so we can
Policy
get our.
versus, great,
Right.
thank you.
So,
Yeah.
thanks for the question.
I want to just do a time check with the council to see if you need a break at this point. I'm seeing yes, okay. So let's take a very short 5-minute break, and just a reminder that it looks like there's a lot of carbohydrates on the table over here. Those of you who would like to make sure that
When will public comment be allowed?
we're gonna go through all of the sections, and then we're gonna get to the public. Yes, no problem.
If a disc runs out, when it switches to the other one,
Look,
you can pull it out and dump the data on it.
Hey, nice to meet you. Yeah, oh yeah, good time. Thank you very much. I don't think I've ever done a budget.
Cutting.
Good afternoon, thank you all. So I'll start out with accomplishments from the police department. We've maintained staffing and we have been trying to deliver the highest quality of law enforcement services that we can, much through presence and enforcement. The other things that we've been working on are public outreach and a lot of community education and trying to gather in front of groups and with groups to make sure that everybody is understanding all the services that we can provide. And then we've done a lot of work this year with the schools. The schools unfortunately have become national and local attention based on events, and as such we've been driven into the schools more from a law enforcement perspective and working with them to try to come up with safety measures that are accommodating everybody's needs. Our goals this next year, obviously traffic safety is one of the most significant for the board, and we will do our part to ensure that we are doing as much to enhance that through presence and enforcement. We have done several smaller short-term tests to see how well we can reduce speed and improve stopping safety for pedestrians. And we've been pretty successful with it. Numbers are still to come, but we're going to do more and more of those types of services, and working with Mike Berger and his team on the traffic safety committee side. And then improving public safety's presence at events. I know Tuesday night markets are a big one. We've been working a lot with Lisa and her team to ensure that we are present and seen and visible, because I think it's a very important part. And then through many other smaller groups in education. As we look at our expenses, most of the significant changes in this are from contract-related issues with the sheriff's office. The unions have just settled, they are in the process of settling their contract negotiations for next year. And so we're looking at about a 5% increase into next year's contract expense. Aside from that, most of the other increases are in just normal standard. The 5% significantly is in the contract. The additional requests that we are making, one is in a patrol car that we want to transfer from a city-owned vehicle to a leased vehicle for long-term benefits in that. And then the other one is in the automated license plate reader, which I'll be presenting on June 7th at the city council meeting. I'm happy to talk about that in any way that is necessary. Sums up.
Okay, any questions for Chief Cutting regarding the budget? Mr. Ding.
I have a question regarding the school resource officer. This position is available or covered by your deputy chief police?
Yes, so we have a community-oriented policing officer position that has been in the service plan with the city, between the sheriff's office and the city, for the last 2 years. This would be the third year.
That position is a 75-25 split, 75 to the city, 25 to the county. It has not been staffed to date due to personnel staffing at the sheriff's office, not because of the contract. So as of today, it is still not a staffed position, but I do have it in our budget request for this next fiscal year, as 50% about of that position is based on school safety. It is not termed a school resource officer. That position, to have a full-time school resource officer, would need to be an agreement between the school board or the superintendent of the school district, the city, and the sheriff's office, because it's a 33% split all the way around to cover the entire district. Based on what I've learned at this point, I would say that the school district is, or the school board is not interested in their third of that. So I think we are back to the community-oriented policing position at 50% towards the schools.
Thank you for verification. It's very important. Yeah, we are not ready, and also we need a waiting for another two parties agree with us. Thank you.
Yes.
Any further questions for Chief Petty? And the license plate reader will come back to us as a policy that we have to adopt, is that correct?
It's a presentation that you need to hear
Okay,
and
that we
receive.
need. Very good.
Yes, the policy's already been submitted
Okay,
in the
great.
packet for the June 7th meeting.
Excellent. Okay. Is there any, can you imagine any recoup of savings with the implementation of that?
So an investigative, it's a significant tool for us to be able to eliminate a lot of crime that comes to the city. It's not, majority of the, and it's specific to violent crimes and auto theft, catalytic converter theft. So the savings to the city itself, no, but to the community, significant. We had about $163,000 worth of cars stolen the last fiscal year, so 22, 23. So, I'm sorry, the calendar year of 22. So I can't eliminate that, but I can reduce that significantly with the ALPRs, and I'll talk a lot about that on the 7th.
Very good. Thank you for that. Okay. Right. Okay, seeing no further questions, we'll move on to fire.
Good afternoon, council. So to move through some of the accomplishments of fire, we spent last year and we completed our community-driven strategic plan that gives kind of our roadmap for the next 5 years. We continue to participate in the ground emergency medical transportation and intergovernmental transfer ambulance transport reimbursement programs, which was an over $700,000 net revenue to the city last fiscal year. That will be, that number could be possibly going up. There's a new program that just started this year. We're still figuring out where we're going to sit with that program, the public partnership. We implemented a canine therapy and a peer support program for both the city, the district, and anybody that would need it. We've had successful efforts to improve the fire and EMS services valley-wide. We created a new fire inspector position at no additional cost to the city. We completed all state mandated fire inspections in schools, apartments, hotels, and places of assembly. We've created safe communities through community preparedness and outreach, including the Community Wildfire Prevention Plan, Fire Safe Councils, Defensible Space, and the Chipper Program and Fuels Reduction Projects. So some of the goals for this coming 2023-2024, we are actively supporting efforts to pass a half-cent countywide sales tax to improve fire services. We continue to support community groups, fire safe councils, and Firewise communities in efforts towards additional emergency preparedness and hazard mitigation. We're attempting to place additional AEDs in the community and expand our hands-only CPR training. We continue to home grow our workforce through volunteer training and educational support. We've started a Leave Behind Narcan program to reduce opioid deaths within the city and the valley. And we continue to promote and deliver our emergency preparedness training program in English and Spanish. The Sonoma Citizens Organized and Prepared for Emergencies is the name of that. So the one additional request that we had goes to the expiration of the SAFER grant, or the new minimum staffing. So in the SVFRA contract, there's a, I believe it's 396.
Yep.
Yes. That goes to what we are going to previously call the SAFER program. The minimum staffing are positions that were in the city contract originally with 3-person engine companies, and as the daily staffing. That SAFER grant has expired, and those are minimum staffing now. And we're currently working on the fire sales tax to fund these and other improvements long term. And some of the efforts that we've had for cost recovery is 2019, we updated the EMS fee schedule, and we're doing it again this year. Currently, we've done some impact fees somewhere, I believe, right around $100,000 impact fee recovery, OES engine rental for the city, and then any prevention fees.
Okay, any questions for the battalion chief? I have one if no, oh, Ron, please, go ahead.
On your accomplishments, and you talked about the reimbursement regarding the ambulance transport, we're currently under a lawsuit with a private ambulance seeking, I think, public information.
Yes.
Will that have an impact or a reality? What would be the impact, if any, should they be successful with that lawsuit?
I don't believe there will be any impact to us.
So in terms of speculating, we'll still have a revenue stream of some type of reimbursement that will stay. And my second question is, under the Narcan, have we had a number of incidences within our city?
I don't believe we have, but we have had, we've had a few. It's probably more in the valley, but there always is a few a year in the city limits. I'd have to pull records and numbers to be able to give you the exact, but it's not a lot, but it's enough that, and it's kind of the industry standard, as if you will.
On terms of the 3-person engine, does the city still have volunteers?
The city still does have volunteers.
And how does that integrate in with a call?
The volunteers, as it was with the 3-person staffing and the contract initially, the 3rd person was a volunteer. There's not a lot of volunteers available anymore generally throughout the day. Most of our volunteers now are career-oriented volunteers, so they come in, they get some experience, and they kind of move around.
Okay.
We still do utilize them, and we will utilize them as a 4th person on the fire engine when we have them.
And is the 3-person a statewide expectation or
It's
mandate?
kind of a national industry standard.
So it's a standard and not a
Yeah, it's an NFPA standard.
Thank you.
Okay. John, did you have a question?
No.
No, oh, okay. So just with regard to the half-cent county sales tax thing, so we'll probably want to bring that to the council for support at some point, or discussion, I should say. And I owe Dustin a phone call on that. And he and I have been playing phone tag on that. So I'm looking forward to at least personally and hopefully, organizationally.
And I'm sure Chief Aker will be speaking more about that when it's all kind of said and done. It's
Yeah.
coming to the final minutes now of getting that,
Getting it.
put it together.
Put it together, right, exactly. Okay, so we'll know more about that, yeah.
And that's where the fire chief is right now, and he couldn't make it through this, he's in a meeting to finalize that with the county.
Yeah, they always schedule it when they meet. Anyway. Okay, thank you. Any other questions? No,
I have a question regarding July 4th fireworks and conducted by a nonprofit, definitely not showing here. You know, can you tell us a little bit what the current situation? It's running wide so well, and do you provide any advice or professional service with them, or?
We provide the Sonoma Volunteer Firefighters Association puts on the fireworks show every year. We do have the licensed pyrotechnician that puts the show on. We own the majority of the equipment that we need, with the exception of the product, the fireworks themselves that need to be put together and made by professionals, more professional than us. So as of right now, we're looking pretty good with the majority of the stuff, but there is a deficit in the amount of donations that we've received for the product.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
So we're working to try and get that worked out as well.
That's great.
Good.
Thank you.
I'm sure it will work.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any other questions for Sean? No, I'm good. Thank you so much.
All right.
All right. We're at the CIP, Public Works. Back.
Okay, hello again.
Hey.
Starting off with our capital improvement program in the park section. On the next slide, we show the Montini Open Space CAPP 6. This is one of our accomplishments this year. Permitted, designed, and constructed the Montini Connector Trail between To-Go Point and Holstein Hill Trail. We've got the Depot Park renovation, CAPP 9. That's in addition to the HVAC project up there. That's going to complete the renovation project, which was one of the council goals regarding restroom renovations. And completed a successful RFP process to hire an on-call landscape architect to assist the city in design of upcoming park improvement projects. Park CIP 23-24 goals on the next slide. The Olson Park Improvement Project, CIP 8. We're in the conceptual design, neighborhood outreach, and move forward with construction on that project this year to improve Olson Park. Depot Park renovation, CIP 9. That's the park renovation project for the summer of 2023 I was just talking about previously. Plaza Park enhancements, CIP 10. That's the waste receptacles. We're making progress lately on that. Sonoma Oaks Playground, CIP project P12. Complete design and move forward to construction of a small playground structure at Sonoma Oaks Park. And then also Fifth Street West and MacArthur Park project CIP 13. This year, complete conceptual design, neighborhood outreach with park concept for the public space at Fifth Street West. And Mayor, that was directly in response to the point you brought up earlier.
Thank you.
Yep. The next slide, we just include funding sources for that. And if anybody's got any questions on that, I could answer them. I don't have anything to report other than the numbers that are in the slides. 4 different general fund, Quimby Act, developer funds, Prop 68 state funds, and Parks Measure M county funds. Any questions
Any
on
questions on any of these?
Park CIP?
So there's, I'm sorry, go ahead.
What's our balance in the Quimby funds, do you know?
Not off the top of my head.
It's not entirely accurate. Chuck would give you a better one, but I believe we have about $700,000.
And there's no general fund monies contributed to this?
$35,000 in the first column. So 15 for Olson Park and 20,000 for Sonoma Oaks. Yeah.
no any fund for Depot Park renovation. That is we carry over from previous year or
Yes.
okay.
And the Olson Park Improvement Project, do you have any specifics on that? Let us know exactly what that looks like.
Olson Park Improvement Project. Olson Park. Oriana, specifically, what components are we on?
Yeah, so Olson Park is just kind of an older residential neighborhood park, and there's a big hedge around the playground that's a security risk, and the picnic area is completely overgrown, so we're gonna redo the picnic area, create some shade, rethink the hedge, maybe add a couple of playground features, bring in some low water use landscape features along the trail, and maybe some increased exercise equipment, because that's the place where there's the basketball court. And our first step, we're launching a Survey Monkey this week to kind of get some neighborhood feedback, and then we're gonna have a meeting in the park in July.
Okay,
So,
yeah.
to figure out what people want to put there, but that's our
Yeah.
initial thought.
Great, I'm glad you mentioned the word shade, because I went to that park recently and it's brutal. It's brutal, and it hasn't even been super hot.
Yeah.
And, to take kids on any of that equipment in that heat, it's really too much. So, so all of the things that you pointed out, I noted, and thank you very much.
And so, and in the playground as well as the picnic area, so we're gonna do a combination of like shade sails and trees, which won't be big enough to provide immediate shade, but for kind of long-term.
Yeah, I went there in the middle of the day, and, I was part of the, the scavenger hunt for Earth Day, to count how many picnic tables at Olson Park. So, was doing my due diligence to go to all the parks and look at them, and, your assessment, it is very overgrown, it was uncomfortable, you can't really walk through there, and yet that serves, again, on the west side, a lot of residents, so would love to see that improve. Thank you so much for all that, appreciate that. Any other questions? You should do that
Survey Monkey.
Survey Monkey, and also if we could, the scavenger hunt thing of all the parks, because it was an eye opener for me to look at it. So, thank you.
Add one thing to Councilmember Ding's
Yeah.
question about the carryover funding. So in the packet, there's a 5-year projected CIP included in the packet,
Yes.
which is really important because it's all we're showing here and all Mike's showing is
Yeah.
what's budgeted in year one.
Okay.
There's 5-year projections, but also there's carryover funding that's identified, to your point.
That's great.
How much is brought forward. So,
Thank you.
It's great.
Yes, we have it like this.
We're gonna fix that from now
No
on.
problem.
Yeah.
We're not gonna have any side, we're not gonna do that next time. We're gonna have everything the same portrait or landscape, not both. Okay,
Great, moving into CIP for streets.
okay.
Got accomplishments from 22-23. Chase Street Bridge replacement. We received our E76 funding for Chase Street Bridge replacement project. We're getting granite construction under contract currently. Advertising awarded. We have a construction manager also, and we're going to begin construction on that project within the next couple of weeks. Probably a road closure towards the end of June. Friar Creek Pedestrian Bridge, CIPT2. We completed that project. It's done. We're still seeking full reimbursement from the state, and that's on track. 2022 citywide slurry seal project, CIPT3. We completed the 2022. That involved 14 streets and 2 pedestrian pathway segments. We've also got our safety improvements project, CIPT6, which we completed design for a new curb ramp at 2nd Street West and West Napa Street in front of Union 76, and I'm currently working with Union 76 on some property acquisition activities. Also, Broadway crossing, CIPT10. As I mentioned earlier, we've got 4 ped crossings that are going in there, 2 of which that were removed when Caltrans did their overlay job. Right now, we're working on 2 of those locations, trying to overcome abandoned utility and light utility conflicts. 23-24 goals, we will complete the Chase Street Bridge Replacement Project. We've also got our CAPT 3 slurry seal project that we're planning on doing for 21 street segments this year. Street Road Rehab, CAPT 5, that's the West Main Street, which I don't know if you noticed or not, but winter took a toll on that. We're gonna have to get in there and do some work. 7th Street West in between Napa Street and Spain Street. And then the road that you drove on up here, coming up, 1st Street West, roadway design and we will be working on preliminary design on that job. Roadway safety projects, CAPT 6, we're gonna advance the work that's been done on 5th Street and Studley intersection. Well, it's kind of an intersection, but it's a bulb out there. The safety design enhancements at that location. And then we've got our streetscape enhancements, advanced concept design for Napa Street and Broadway, the SR12 corridor. And then also the Broadway crossings that I already talked about. We'll finish those up this summer. On the next slide, we just have our different funding, the general fund gas tax, RMRA SB1, and our transportation measure M designations, and I could answer any questions on that if anybody had any.
Any questions for Mr. Berger?
Can I just get an explanation of what RMRA, that acronym, and what the limitations of what that funds specifically?
Rehabilitation.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's SB1.
Okay.
Voter approved, state funded.
And then in contrast, Measure M is county?
Measure M is county, yeah.
And this is gonna sound like a broken record, but if we're responsible for 11%, or approximately 11% of the Chase Street Bridge, and we're at 3.3 million for that contract, we're not taking anything out of the general fund to bridge that gap? Because I see 60 here, but I think the math on 3.3 million at 11% exceeds.
Yeah, and I believe that that's carryover, so that'll probably be in the slide that David was just talking about a second ago.
Okay.
From this year.
Oh, it's carried, okay.
Yeah, it will be carried forward into next year's fiscal budget.
Thank you.
Yeah, and there's no general fund contribution on that
Thank you.
at this time.
Okay,
Yes.
Patricia.
Yeah, on the pedestrian crossings, do you have some general description of what they will be, and if you feel like that they will meet the requests of the public for the type of, on Broadway, the pedestrian crossings on Broadway?
Sarah, we have a website on that. There's a picture of them on the website, right?
Oh, there is.
Yeah, so it's one of those signs that, it's a blinking light that's about this big, and it's very bright. It's pedestrian activated with a push button. It's solar powered, and when the pedestrians hit it, we'll be able to set for how long those lights blink. And these are very typical. In Napa's got a lot of them. So there are a lot of them in Sonoma County. Kauai, I just went on vacation over there about 4 or 5 months ago, and they're all over there. Yeah, I would definitely recommend checking those out. But they're all over Sonoma and Napa County. And it's the predominant highway crossing type. Caltrans doesn't install them in there right away, officially, but they allow them to be installed in there right away. But they don't have a standard plan for them as of now. So a lot of local agencies are putting them in Caltrans right away. Yeah, and that's what we're doing here. And it hasn't increased the workload a lot. It's increased it a little bit, putting them in on Caltrans right away. But right now, like I alluded to earlier, we're having, everywhere we try to dig a hole, we're coming up with old utilities, trying to figure out whose they are, make sure they're abandoned, and then have them removed. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? I have one. Who owns the sort of island, if you will, on Highway 12, just as it turns north across from Staples? That little island.
I do.
Okay, good.
Personally?
We've worked out there a little bit.
No, if people are interested in adopting it, for example.
I would definitely give it up to anybody willing to adopt it.
Okay, I've got someone for you. Okay.
Wonderful,
Okay.
wonderful.
And hopefully that'll take something off your plate.
That would be excellent.
Okay,
Yeah.
we got it. To be continued.
Yep.
Got it for you. All
Sounds
right.
great.
Good.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. So I believe we're at the end of
Oh my goodness.
the slides. How do you wish to proceed, Mr. Goodman?
Yeah, thank you. We made good time. I think it'd be great to hear from the public in terms of
Okay, we're ready for
ideas,
that.
unless there's any general questions from the council before
No,
we
I
start.
think we'll
the-
hear from the
Okay.
public, I think that's right, and then afterwards, we'll come back to the council and see if there's any further direction, and so I'll just ask that, people just stand up and, or raise your hand or something, or,
And-
and we'll, yes.
And real quick, before we end today too, we'll just want to recap kind of where the next steps we're going to take and what you're going to see next.
Yes.
Just so we're all on the same page about the next steps.
That sounds wonderful. Okay, comments from the public. Yes, sir, please. Stand up and so we can hear you.
Okay.
We're gonna do it jointly
Oh,
with Tom first, and I'll
okay.
be next. We're both the chair and vice chair of the Climate Action Committee.
Excellent.
Thank you. Appreciate this opportunity, and wow, lots of work going on here in the city. Pretty exciting. Our new commission, this Climate Action Commission, we have a coordinator on staff, the sustainability coordinator, but we don't have a department head. We've just lost the person that we've been working with. So this process is a little difficult for us because we haven't had the opportunity to feed our budget recommendations into the budget that you've just received. We did speak with Susan and Travis Wagner before, and we came up with recommendations of our commission members of about $231,000 to implement the draft climate action plan that the city staff, Travis Wagner, has prepared for the city. We were told that staff has already included roughly $56,000, or about 24% of that, in the request that you've received today. So David and I are here today to sort of briefly outline the things that we think are currently unfunded in the climate action plan, and we're going to be going forward through the next couple of meetings and months to fill that gap. But most importantly, we wanted to break out the big categories that we're thinking about at the Climate Action Commission. One is community-wide planning, outreach, and implementation. And that includes transportations, buildings, solid waste, and community engagement, which we consider very important. And then capital investment in city assets. These are the things the city owns already, your buildings, your parks, and whatnot. And the investments that we seek to make there are municipal building decarbonization, energy efficiency improvements and solar improvements to your buildings that you own, rainwater capture, water bottle filling stations. We're told that many of those things are actually already funded. For example, the water bottle filling stations are grant funded, solid waste improvements are funded. There is an ongoing, our number one priority was transportation. From our commission, we consider transportation to be the biggest area that needs to be focused on. And we have, in addition to our budget requests, we have no budget requirements that just require staff time to implement. So that's all I can squeeze in a brief time. So thank you for your consideration of our ask.
And the other half of this presentation and the detailed numbers are available. The city manager, our fine new city manager, has already received this document from me in our meetings, so we know about that. With new budget constraints in hand, my sense is that we need to focus on the existing allocations rather than the $175,000 added request that I thought I'd be presenting today. I think that's probably not terribly realistic. I would also note in preamble that we have an approved climate emergency resolution, and in the last couple of hours, 2.5 hours, I've heard very little in the way of budget requests that are climate germane. Very, very little. We could parse it and find a few things, but there was very little that is climate germane. I would hope that over the next year or so, as the new Climate Action Commission works with you at the council and with others, that we can get more specific so that we can become true leaders in terms of climate emergency effective action. As part of that, it seems to me critical that we focus over the next year with $1 million budget squeeze that we saw this afternoon on partnerships and on grant funding. State funding may be squeezed, but will be available. Local nonprofits, including the Ecology Center, have several from good grants from CAL FIRE, for example. There are ways in which the city can be involved in urban forestry, for example, grants from the federal government, from USDA. There are a number of things that partnerships with local nonprofits that know how to write grants with the city and potentially with the county or RCPA on the climate side, because a lot of these grants involve environmental justice and push us toward the springs. Some specifics on our original budget request where we do think there's an opportunity to move forward with joint activities. Carbon sequestration, planting new trees, is a very important effort approved by the Climate Action Commission at its previous meeting. We propose to plant new trees throughout the city of Sonoma. We're working with the Parks and Recreation Commission in a joint effort. We've had 2 meetings already and another coming up later to orient ourselves around a tree inventory process, getting in some bids for a tree inventory of the city. And we're particularly interested in a new native plant pocket forest in J.E. Carter Park, which is on the west side. I would note, Madam Mayor, in terms of density of greenhouse gas materials at a somewhat underused park near Friar Creek, and the same kind of dense forest could be an interesting opportunity for us at 5th Street West and MacArthur in terms of that park, which is already on the list. And I've had the pleasure of coordinating directly with the chair of the Parks and Rec Commission, John Donnelly, in moving forward on that. We also have a number of efforts that we're very interested in on solar electrification in the city of Sonoma mobile home parks. So far, experts who were working with the Climate Action Commission on that are finding that the weight of the solar arrays cause a problem in mobile homes, but we're continuing to pursue what might be possible. The theme here is climate justice. We do not want the City of Sonoma's Climate Action Program to be just associated with those folks who are at the upper income scale. But that's why we picked this, the mobile home park as an area, and we may want eventually to be looking at more cooperation with the Springs area as we seek federal funding. The EJ, environmental justice, climate justice monies tend to be more available than classic electricity reduction alone from solar. So that could be an area that we really want to be thinking about. Some very interesting opportunities exist in water conservation that we'll be working more on. Last but not least, and I'm probably over my 3 minutes, but I don't see a red light at the moment. The Community Engagement Plan for Climate has a $3,500 budget, a very modest budget that apparently has been approved in the, unless it gets cut in terms of retaining the budget that's there, and it's obviously very important. We saw earlier a commitment for a September approval of a climate action plan that hasn't seen the light of day yet, and it's summertime. So that we are committed, and I stand before you telling you we are committed to doing our level best over the summer to begin to implement an effective community engagement effort. We call it engagement, not outreach, because we truly believe it's two-way, not just one way. So we'll be moving forward with respect to the climate plan, the draft plan, getting it out into the public. And their specific information on that is in the agenda for tomorrow night's Climate Action Commission, should any of you have the moment in all of your free time to take a look at that agenda item for tomorrow night. So, and last item, just to let you know, there are a couple of areas where we're looking longer term at the Climate Action Commission. It's again a new commission in our first and so far only meeting so far. We're very intrigued with the idea of what it means to be a climate smart tourist destination. There's a lot of vehicle miles traveled associated with being climate smart. How do we deal with that in an effective way? Lisa and I have been around the horn on this already over the last couple of years in thinking about the vehicle mile traveled associated with events on the plaza that we as a city sponsor and love, and yet they're not climate smart. They're climate affecting. So how do we deal with this? And discussions are underway for various ways to deal with this issue of climate smart tourism in some effective ways. And of course the issue of parking and parking on the plaza and the signal we send. And I normally say something controversial before I'll sit down, which I promise to do very soon. That's the end of my notes. The fact that parking is still free on the plaza does not send a signal that we are being climate smart, nor does it suggest that we're implementing an effective climate action plan. I thank you for your time.
All right. Yes, Mr. Alba.
Good afternoon. I've prepared a few comments and I sent my comments in, so I hope you had a chance to read them. The city has reserve money, so I suggest that you do use it for the greatest needs that we have, and one of those top needs is affordable housing. And so I would encourage you to take your fiscal responsibility, which you are, and also your ethical responsibility to care for the least well off. The interim finance director has advised the city that the city will come out of the recession in 2024. So go ahead and use the reserves. It seems like you should be able to do that without much trouble. I would suggest, maybe more controversial than my friend David, is that you cap police and fire at 50% of the budget. This chunk of the city budget is kind of similar to the way you see the U.S. military budget in the United States, in that it outstrips all social spending, and everyone, it grows and grows, and decision makers and managers won't touch it. So, in my opinion, parity is really called for other legitimate city needs, like the climate needs that we have here and the housing needs. So while I realize that police and fire are important, I think it would also be important to keep it in proportion to the other legitimate needs that the city has. So for the budget, would definitely encourage you to fund the 3-year homeless plan and pay attention to the precariously housed. Not just the homeless, the precariously housed. I know a woman in Food for All, her apartment burned down. She can't find a place to live. She doesn't have formal credit. She can't find a place to live anywhere here. So this is somebody who's a very important member of the community, who really works hard, who can't find a place to live here. So, and also I wanted to ask what will happen to the 6+ people who won't have overnight parking here anymore. So I think it's important that the city, you know, I'm glad to see that the city manager has some of those funds at his discretion. I'd like to see that homeless plan funded at a more aggressive level. And then also to fund the housing element programs and policies. And so the city could go low, medium, or high. I'd suggest that you go as high as you can for affordable housing production. There's been a crisis here since 2008. And my friend in Food for All is just the latest person, and these people just disappear. There's no, like, you know, here's a note in the paper that they're gone. People just trickle out and they're gone. And so that really affects the fabric of the community when people are gone like that. I'd also like to suggest that the city create an equity commission and use a planning staff for that, and balance the existing focus that the city has on funding the chamber for its economic leg, and has an environmental climate leg with my friends over here for the triple bottom line. So we have full cost accounting, thinking of budget, if you have an equity commission. Equity has about 0 formal attention here in the city, so I'd like to see the city steer towards a triple bottom line type of focus. And that, then I also wanted to ask in Public Works, why does the crosswalk at 3rd Street West and Napa Street West always break? Those are my, and I'd also like to donate 15 seconds to Tom.
3rd Street West? In front of St. Francis?
Yes.
That's Caltrans.
That's why it always breaks.
You didn't say City of Sonoma Public Works. It's Caltrans.
I just wanted to briefly add, I had neglected to mention,
that I had a great conversation with Mike Berger at the break, and we are looking forward to coordinating our municipal recommendations with his department, obviously. And also to say that of relevance today for you, one of our recommendations that would cost no budget would be to implement a moratorium on all new vehicle purchases in the city this year until staff's vehicle fleet electrification plan can be completed. That's something that the Sustainability Coordinator's Draft Climate Action Plan has recommended, that we do plan for a transition to electric vehicles. It makes no sense to us to invest in fossil fuel vehicles that are going to be obsolete so soon. So those are some recommendations for today's deliberation. Thank you for your consideration again.
Donna.
Hello, everybody. I really like what I see in terms of the budget, and I hope that I just have a couple of comments, really brief, that'll kind of complement what we just heard here. And it's really around codifying in your goals, the city council goals, city manager goals, and the planning commission. This idea that you, around affordable housing, that you want to identify funding, you want to identify sites. What I see missing is implementation. And it would be great to actually coordinate the outreach and specify a staff member, perhaps in part of the strategies of the city manager around affordable housing. And specifically, again, once you find the sites, once you find the funding, let's create those relationships with the nonprofits and the developers and the landlords that we actually can identify and move forward with with the housing. So I think waiting for the general plan isn't necessary. It hopefully won't cause you much in the budget to actually dedicate someone to find the grants, work with the nonprofits to get the grants, and coordinate what's already out there federally so that it's really easy for the developers to come in. And again, foster this idea about affordable housing because it impacts the climate as well, if we can get folks to actually be local. And so I didn't see anything in the planning department around implementing parts of the housing element around affordability. And I think that would be a great place for this coordinator to live and to work with the nonprofits who are a well-oiled machine, as we heard about the SEC. So is the Land Trust. So is the Eden Housing Project. So is Community H. I mean, there are a lot of people out there that I think we need to work with, and we haven't yet. So hopefully it won't impact the budget, but I'd love to see it actually in the goals so that the staff are accountable to actually do this. Thanks.
Okay. Robert.
May I come over here? I
Certainly.
don't like, may I sit down? I don't like looking at backs. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Happy to see all of you again. I consider you good friends. I want to endorse all of the comments that I've just heard. And what I have to say does not rise to the level of seriousness or concern, but it's part of our city that I wanted to discuss. I had two minds of what to say today. First was, I was going to say, let's have a moment of silence for the late, great, fabled project that the City of Sonoma's League for Historic Preservation has requested. But facing the reality, and that was too dramatic an approach, I want to say the following. We've had three plans, always, Plan A, B, and C, always have that. Plan A was for us, the Sonoma League, to have built a tough shed that never passed muster for the city. Plan B was to have the city build the shed, and it became very complicated. I do appreciate the mayor and others on the city council and the city staff who have supported me and encouraged me through this process. So as you know, I'm fairly old. I'm not a baby boomer. I'm before that. It's called the silent generation, though I've never lived up to that label. I want to say this. I've tried to think out of the box, and that's something that we didn't grow up with, the silent generation. So what I'd like to propose to you to start thinking about so we can move this fabled project from the Ethernet or from the clouds to page 76 on your budget. Despite your probable rating, financial rating, the Sonoma League has some money. We spent, as I've told you before, over $100,000 over the last 4 years on capital improvements using our money, not your money. We spent over $20,000 on maintenance, which is our responsibility. We feel this project is of importance to us, and we do have some money left for cushions. We had a $5,000 deficit last year. So we have some money. So I want to propose that the city of Sonoma, you don't have to give me an answer today because I know you won't, but I want to propose that the city of Sonoma sell the Sonoma League for Historic Preservation a bond for $25,000 or so on a 5-year basis to be start payable after a year, so that we can have the city have funds to build this storage shed for us. That's what I'd like to say. This is a new wrinkle on partnership, and I think I'm serious about this. And I would like you all to be serious about it as well. That's all I have to say from the Sonoma League. I'm also speaking as a director. I am the executive director of Sonoma League. You're smiling. Thank you, Sandra. I'm also a director of Sister Cities, and I want to say we have a great partnership with the city, with Sister Cities. We treasure it. You help us a lot. We think we bring a new kind of peoples from the world to our city and to celebrate the greatness of what we have. And we do have a big list of wonderful things about our little valley. And so the Sister Cities is very appreciative of all of your contributions and support for us. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Demler. Other comments from the public? No? All right, seeing none, public comment is closed, and we'll bring it back to the council. Ms. Fra-Rivas, you have a question?
We had an email from John Donnelly. I don't know, do we want to?
Well, it's in the public
We just
record.
received it.
Yeah.
It's in the public record. Okay, no.
Unless you have any comments on any of the things.
I have a general comments. That is a great in the study section. And I have the experience 3 times. That is the best one, especially in the city manager and the finance director. Just came in, took this in a role. Usually, these kind of budget is in a half year, at least a half year's workload. They can finish it within the weeks. That is the tremendous. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you for saying that. Our resident budget expert. And
Not really.
yes, you are. You've done a lot of good work on it. It is remarkable the amount of work that has been put in a short period of time, and unfortunately, the amount of work that hadn't been put in a much greater period of time, which we're having to work on. And yet we have, because we had good council members that were conservative in their policies regarding money, have been very judicious with the public's money. We're in good financial position, but going forward we'll be in a better financial position. And I think a lot of the things that people have talked about you may not see in the budget, because that doesn't mean they're not being done. I mean, for one thing, on the affordable housing front, I mean, some of you, I wear a lot of hats in my life, and I work every single day with the nonprofit housing and what's going on with that, and I've been talking to Burbank and several others. So I don't want people to think that because it's not in there that things are not happening with regard to housing and what to do with it. And I think that now we'll have, through the city manager's office, we're gonna have a robust discussion about how to use and actually leverage the amount of money we do have to create more opportunities to build. But we just needed someone in place to be able to do that. So I don't want people to think that things aren't happening because they're not necessarily line item listed. There's a lot of things going on. Right, any other comments or questions before we adjourn? So I want to give it back to the city manager to tell us our next steps. I personally would like something that I was used to in my school board role, and I brought it up earlier regarding the audit, is we always had a budget timeline that said when we received our unaudited actuals, when we received our audit, when we make budget adjustments, etc. And it would be nice to have a calendar of that so that it for nothing else, it keeps you on track and it lets the public know when these things are going to happen. So even if there isn't an agency that requires us to submit, we still should have a budget timeline and opportunities to work with it. Yes.
Yeah, just following up on that, I think that how things transpired, for example, having a new commission, right, that is creating a budget, not knowing what the parameters are for a budget, not knowing what's planning, how they could coordinate, potentially meet with planning ahead of time and do all of that, so that we have to be taking that much more long-term thinking of, what needs to happen so that, and being a new council person, what type of education needs to happen for commissioners, for new council members, because budgeting is really a crucial part, and understanding. So for me, when I look at our goals, I think from more of a business planning point of view of like things that are already in the works don't become your priorities, right? But then budgeting goes to your priorities, and if you haven't raised something that's already in the works to your priorities, then the budgeting doesn't address it. So there's a lot of education, I think, that needs to be done so that we are effectively thinking long-term and doing the pre-work that we need to do so that when we're having these budget discussions, that we're able to really think about the whole picture. And I think we did a little bit of that today, but I think a good other thing for all of us to have the opportunity to do is, and I know this will be part of the general plan, but since this is the budget for this year, is how are we really saying, okay, yes, we have our priorities, but in light of this budget and the deficit and, a new city manager, what are we really seeking to accomplish in the next year? Are there any changes, amendments to what we need to be doing?
Right.
So those are just my thoughts.
It's important to note that our budget is based on policy. I mean, you don't submit a budget, you submit a policy, and then the policy is adopted, amended, whatever, and then we see how we can fund that. So I think, and that needs, in a general sense, needs to be, everyone needs to understand that we don't just submit, random, invoices, if you will. And that everything has to be policy driven and goal driven and so forth, and then, but how do we get from the policy that we've adopted to the implementation and to the funding of it? So it's a timeline, and I think having a budget, an annual budget timeline, even with it, for things to be received from committees and policies and so forth, I think will be helpful. John, did you have something?
I do.
Please.
Well, I would like to request a couple things at the risk of creating some work. First, I think it would be beneficial for the council to at least be familiar with the internal service fund balances and where those live. And then I would be interested to know what would the impacts be if we did a 4% cut to the budget. And whether that's by department and if the city manager wants to manage that proposal, what would the impacts be to the city and the services? So those are two things. The easy solution is to run to the reserve and utilize some of that funding, but we've lived through a very interesting time between fires, pandemics, and you know what, it's nice to be able to sleep at night knowing that if there's a crisis that we're going to be able to manage it. And so I'm not keen on just jumping right to the reserve solution. But I would be interested to know what a 4% cut would look like. Thank you.
Any other?
I'll echo what John was saying. I think that it would be easy just to simply dip into our reserves. But it seems like our reserves should be for unanticipated, not within our control impacts. The sadness is that this was in our control and now we're living with it. And it's unfortunate that we find ourselves in this deficit because it seems like there were people in the past that knew this and weren't forthcoming. And that's disappointing because decisions were made a couple of weeks ago when we had our mid-season adjustments, but we were under the illusion that we had a surplus. And then we find ourselves a couple of weeks later, the harsh reality is that we're down $1 million. So it's disappointing to think, particularly coming on as a relatively new councilman, is that we were asked for mid-year revisions or update, and the information that at least I was basing my support with, was not factual. And that's disappointing. So